All right, welcome friends and family and everybody around the world. We really are excited that you are here watching us live on, where are we live? I don't even know where we're live. We're live on Facebook, and we're live for Facebook Extreme Health Academy, and we're live on our Extreme Health Radio YouTube channel. So thanks guys for joining us. This is the second show of today's broadcast. We've got Stephanie Seneff on the show, and we're going to be talking about glyphosates, and I'll introduce her in just a second. And you guys are really going to want to dial in and listen to this show because she's going to share some interesting things. And I want to share what she wrote to me in an email a little while ago with regards to her latest research on glyphosate. So it's going to shock you and scare you, but yet empower you at the same time. So I'll share her and introduce her in just a second. This is episode 596. So closing in on almost 600 shows here, which is crazy. We started this show back in 2012 and have almost interviewed 600 people. So this is just an awesome, awesome service that we like to do and help people, as many people around the world as we can. So if you want to grab the show notes for today's show, you can go to extremehealthradio.com/596. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, make sure to subscribe so that you get updates. We also notify everyone too on Instagram stories that we're going to go live as well. So make sure to subscribe to us wherever you want to subscribe to us. If you like what we're doing, you can always follow us on any of those platforms here. We just wrapped up a show with Patrick McGowan, all about the power of oxygen for healing, and we talked about breathing and the Buteyko method of breathing, which was really fascinating. We're going to be talking with Stephanie Seneff here pretty soon. I'll introduce her. Some other shows coming up in the future are Angel Howerton. We're going to be talking with her about healing stage 4 uterine cancer naturally. Can you imagine that? Being diagnosed with uterine cancer, stage 4, and healing. Man, that is going to be crazy, crazy, awesome story. So that's coming up on September 3rd. And then we have Dr. Kayla Daniel. We're going to be talking with her about the secrets of detoxification, some things you have never heard before with regards to that. So that's going to be really cool. That's on September 3rd as well. We've got Brian Hoyer coming up, and we'll be talking with him about EMF solutions. He's really a cool guy when it comes to understanding the science behind all of this EMF radiation, 5G, and mitigating your home and stuff like that. So that's going to be a great show coming up on September 10th. And then finally, Dr. Donnie Wilson will be talking with her about healing leaky gut and digestive conditions. So that's going to be really cool. So we broadcast live on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and on Facebook. So if you guys want to join the chat room and join the festivities, join the fun, that will be really cool. So that way we could get your questions answered with our guests. And Stephanie Seneff, oh gosh, I've known about her work for a long time, and she's sort of titled this particular episode, Glyphosate, Autoimmune Diseases, Congenital Defects in Cancer. And one of the things she said to me was in an email, she said, I think I figured out how glyphosate causes non-Hodgkins lymphoma, and the same mechanism can also explain birth. So I'm really interested with what she has to say about that, because my mom was diagnosed with non-Hodgkins lymphoma back in 1995 when she was using Roundup, and she was using, gosh, is that the only name for it? Roundup in her garden. And my goodness, Stephanie, thanks for being on. And this, your work hits home for me, that's for sure.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Yeah. And we were talking before the show. You are coming to us from the beautiful island of Kauai today.
I am so fortunate to be here in Hawaii. I love Hawaii, and we spend a lot of time here.
My goodness. How long do you stay each time you go?
Usually 2 to 3 months. We go summer and winter, so we get away from the worst seasons in Boston. We spend the fall and spring terms in Boston.
Oh my goodness. Great stuff. That is my favorite island over there. Kauai is just beautiful, beautiful. But getting into your work. So your work has been fascinating to me for a lot of years now, and you've been doing a lot of podcasts, a lot of radio interviews, a lot of media with other people trying to get the word out about this glyphosate stuff. And that's sort of been the focus of your work for the past few decades, hasn't it?
Not the past few decades, actually. I only discovered glyphosate about 6 years ago. It totally changed my life. I was looking for what was causing the autism epidemic, and I was frustrated at that point. I'd been studying intensely for 5 years and looking at all kinds of things and striking out. I understood a lot more about what autism was about, but I didn't understand what was causing the difficulties that they were having, particularly in the gut. A lot of gut dysbiosis with autism. I couldn't understand what was causing that. I was thinking maybe too many antibiotics. But I happened to hear a talk by Professor Don Huber really 6 years ago about this time, and it changed my life. I walked away from that talk convinced that I had found the answer, and I have not looked back. I mean, I have basically dropped almost everything else I'm doing and devoted full time to glyphosate since then. So I now consider myself to be an expert, but it's an amazing molecule. It is truly incredible. It has a unique mechanism of toxicity that people don't appreciate, and this is what makes it insidiously, cumulatively toxic.
Yeah, and the problem is that it's everywhere, and we'll get into that. But
Yes.
so explain like what glyphosate, like what is the molecule? What is it, and what does it do in the body? Like what's the mechanism of action that causes it to be so damaging, do you think?
Well, yeah, it's because it's a glycine molecule. It's a complete glycine molecule with extra stuff stuck on its nitrogen atom. It has a methylphosphonol group attached to the nitrogen. Very simple molecule, actually. Glycine is the simplest amino acid. The amino acids are the building blocks of protein. So there's about 22 coding amino acids that go into the DNA code. That's the famous code of life.
Okay.
And that codes for the proteins. The 3 letters of the code indicate a particular amino acid. So there's a particular set of 3-letter codes that code for glycine.
Okay.
And the problem that glyphosate has, which it's a theory. I mean, it still hasn't been proven, but I feel like the evidence is overwhelming. In my opinion, the evidence is overwhelming that it's doing this, which is that it's being mistaken for glycine when protein assembly happens. And so it's getting stuck into random proteins at random places where glycine should be.
Wow. That's crazy. So the body
That's really crazy.
Yeah, so the body actually thinks it's one thing, but it's another.
Right, and of course it has that extra stuff on the nitrogen. It has a negative charge. It's very different from glycine in terms of its biophysical and biochemical properties. And the protein, crucially, some of the proteins, some of the time, crucially depend upon glycine to work properly at that particular spot. And if glyphosate substitutes there, it's going to wreck that protein. Things like amyloidoses, where proteins misfold and you get Alzheimer's disease. Things like just enzymes not working anymore, muscle protein that won't contract. It's amazing. I read an article about myosin. Myosin has, depending on how you count, 11 to 14 highly conserved glycine residues. This is because it shows up as glycine in multiple versions of myosin from multiple species. Myosin is a muscle contractor protein. It's the most common protein in muscle.
Okay.
If it gets glycine if the glycine at 699, that location in that molecule is replaced by alanine, which is a very similar molecule, just one extra methyl group, it ruins the.
Oh no. Stephanie, you cut out there. Uh-oh. Let's see. Stephanie, are you there? This is the beauty of doing live shows, my friends. Yep. Okay, I think she's talking, but Stephanie, your video cut out really quick. Let's see. Is there a way for you to... Oh, there we go. There we go. Whoops. Now your audio is not working, unfortunately. You got your video.
Oh, gosh.
Now we got both. Okay.
Oh, great. Wow, that was wild.
Yeah,
I
wow.
got crashed.
Yeah, that's crazy. Okay, so
Gosh.
we probably... back up about 30 seconds, probably.
Yeah, okay. So I was probably... Did I talk about myosin? Did you hear about myosin at all?
You were just getting into that. Yeah, that was
okay,
great.
Yeah, because myosin is fascinating. It's the most common muscle protein, and it's a contractile protein. It contracts. And it has over 10 highly conserved glycine residues, which when they're highly conserved, that means that they're very important because all the species that have different versions of myosin have glycine at that one spot. So it means that it's important. And there's was a study that was done with a specific glycine residue at location 699 in myosin. If you swap it out for alanine, which is just one extra methyl group, then the protein is only can contract at 1% capacity. These are studies that have been done. So this is the kind of research I'm finding. I'm looking for papers that talk about glycine residues in proteins that have essential roles. And I'm just finding amazing things. And I can connect these problems to the various diseases that are going up dramatically in step with a dramatic rise in glyphosate. So we have a huge list of diseases that are rising dramatically. Things like obesity, diabetes, heart disease, Alzheimer's, autism, ADHD, food allergies, all these things that are going up dramatically in our society. Basically, when you adopt a Western diet, you're going to get sick. Things are going to start happening to the society.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, Stephanie, that it, glyphosate is the actual causative factor with this, or just a correlative
Well,
factor?
of course, I think it's causative. I mean, people keep saying correlation doesn't mean causation, and that's fine. I agree with that. It's not always causation. But when you look at all these diseases that are going up dramatically, you have to step aside and say, okay, if it's not glyphosate, what is it? And there aren't many other things, because in terms of agriculture, glyphosate is the only one that matches. The rest of them don't come close. So any chemicals being used in agriculture, you can rule out everybody else. And glyphosate works synergistically with the other toxic chemicals to make them more dangerous than they would otherwise be, because it wrecks the enzymes in the liver that break things down. The CYP enzymes are really important for detoxing other toxic chemicals, and they get busted by glyphosate.
Man, so it's like this cascading effect. So when was glyphosate first introduced?
It was patented and introduced into to be available to the public, I think, in about 1974. So we've had it it's been for over, 40 years? 84, 94, 104. Yeah, over 40 years.
Wow.
It's been around. But it didn't really get heavy use until they introduced the GMO Roundup ready crops in the late 1990s. Yeah. Corn, soy, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa, tobacco, it turns out, which is quite interesting.
Wow. So
GMO Roundup ready.
Wow. So most tobacco is sprayed with glyphosate.
Yes, and I was really interested in that, and I was trying to figure out to what extent it's been adopted. I found papers that said that they had a GMO Roundup ready tobacco, but I found it hard to see to what extent they were actually using it. And it turns out there's a movie out now called Genetically Modified Children, a documentary. You can watch it. It's available.
Wow,
online.
Genetically modified. Is that available for free, or is that like a Netflix kind of a thing?
It's a Netflix, yeah. So
Okay.
it's not for free, but Genetically Modified Children, and I've watched it. It's an amazing story. It's about these kids that are in this small community in northern, not Australia, Argentina, northern Argentina. Yeah. And the area around there is all tobacco farms. So the farmers use GMO. They have GMO Roundup ready tobacco. They use Roundup on the crops.
Wow.
Philip Morris insists that they have to use Roundup on their crops in order to get the proper quality in terms of not having weeds in the crop. To make a pure tobacco that's going to pass inspection, you've got to use Roundup to kill the weeds. And the kids are getting horribly sick. They're getting cancer. They're getting all kinds of really rare genetic mutations are showing up in large numbers among the children in this population. Very sad story. Very telling in terms of both cancer and genetic mutations. New children being born with new genetic mutations that happened during that pregnancy, or in the germ cells that produce that pregnancy.
Wow.
New mutations.
It's crazy because I shared with you the story about my mom, and I'm sure you've heard so many stories like that. My mom was diagnosed with non-Hodgkins lymphoma in 1995, but I remember in the early 90s and late 80s she was using Roundup all over our garden and flowers and all that stuff. And it turns out that my dog that we had during that time, he died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
That's just amazing. That's so amazing.
It's crazy, right?
And it's really interesting, the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I've gone deep into that, of course, at this point, especially because of the lawsuit, which I'm sure hopefully your audience knows about, the Dwayne Johnson story.
Mm-hmm.
A big lawsuit, big win for. I think it's a tipping point. I really hope it's a tipping point. Mm-hmm. We need to get the public aware of the danger of this chemical. It's really sad because there's so much disinformation about glyphosate, how safe it is, how they absolutely assure you, hundreds of papers have shown it's absolutely safe, and it's simply not true. It's simply a lie. And I think the Monsanto folks know that. They're just trying to hold back the evidence, and hide this information from the public because their product is making so much money. It's just really sad to me that we're willing to sacrifice our children for the sake of having cheaper food. It's just stupid. It's really a stupid mistake that we're making. And we don't need enemies. We're going to take ourselves down. Our country is really going to go down the tubes. When you look at the kids today are just so sick. So many of them have so many issues, all the different food allergies. You've got all the EpiPens they have to keep track of at school, and ADHD and autism, of course, which is totally an epidemic. I mean, the prediction there is just terrifying as far as the future is concerned.
Right. Yeah. I heard you say a little while ago, I think it was you in preparation for this interview, but you were saying, in relation to, gluten intolerance. And I think it was you were saying, people aren't really gluten. It's not gluten intolerance. It's glyphosate intolerance.
It's absolutely right? Glyphosate. I really believe that. In fact, that gets right into the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, because you may not realize this, but people with celiac disease they basically have statistically a shorter life, about 4 years shorter lifespan. And the main reason is because they have a tendency to get cancer. And in particular, a cancer that they are especially prone to is non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it's all connected to the gluten problem. Wow. It's really interesting that the gluten intolerance is a direct path to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and all of it is connected to the gut, and the gut's lymph system, and the immune cells that go to the gut to fight the bacteria that are overgrowing, because glyphosate's killed off the beneficial bacteria. So glyphosate starts out by disrupting the gut microbes. Okay. And you end up with an overgrowth of bacteria that bring in the immune system to fight them. You get the inflammatory gut. And then those immune cells get hit by glyphosate too, and this really messes them up. And this is how you get the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's a direct attack of glyphosate on the B cells that are trying to build the antibodies to match the proteins that aren't getting digested, because the gluten isn't getting digested, partly because it's got glyphosate in it, which makes it hard to digest, but also because the enzymes have glyphosate in them. And it's amazing, the digestive enzymes that break down proteins, the trypsin and the pepsin, and then there's something called prolyl-aminopeptidase. These enzymes, prolyl-aminopeptidase in particular, is important for breaking down gluten because it has a lot of proline in it. Proline is difficult to break down. So all of those enzymes have essential glycines in them. And Anthony Samsel has shown that they have glyphosate in them as well. He ordered from a lab a pig version of digestive enzymes. This is something that people take as supplements all the time these days because their digestive enzymes aren't working. People take digestive enzymes as supplements, and they have glyphosate in them. He tested trypsin, pepsin, and lipase. Lipase digests fats, and trypsin and pepsin digest protein. All three of them had high levels of glyphosate in them. We published that in our most latest paper.
I think Dr. Thomas Cowan, who was on our show a while back, he wrote that book, The Heart is Not a Pump.
I know him. I've read his books. Yes, he's got a new book on vaccines as well. He's really great.
He's going to be coming on the show pretty soon to talk about that. But I believe he was referencing your work about this in regards to supplements, because I thought this was really interesting. He was saying that because most of the supplements, like the actual capsules, are made from gelatin, somehow they're getting in through the cows. And so when you say that there's glyphosate in some of those supplements, are you talking about like they're in the actual powdered formula, or they're in the actual gelatin capsule, like he was saying?
Yes and yes.
Oh, wow.
Basically, I think it's all over the place. It's in the vaccines. Anthony tested several different vaccines, and particularly the live virus vaccines, and particularly the MMR, which had the highest level. The glyphosate is in the vaccines. It's being injected into the children. I don't want to think about what that does to the kids. It's in, and I did a paper together with some colleagues looking at drugs, and we did a study on drugs that have a side effect that's death. Basically, we're looking at the side effect data, and death is a pretty severe side effect, pretty conclusive too. So there's no argument about, the drug caused the death. And it was very interesting because we found a set of biological drugs. They were all biological. They were like proteins derived from the blood. In particular, like, for example, a protein that was derived from the lungs of cows. And cows get lots of glyphosate in their feed. And studies have shown the highest concentrations of glyphosate among the organs was in the lungs. And this protein is harvested from the lungs of cows. And it causes an absolutely bizarre reaction that nobody understands. Occasionally, it's like a Russian roulette, because it might have this glyphosate in it. It's an injectable. So you inject this protein, and it can just take you down. I mean, it can cause death as a sort of intense reaction to this. I think it's the glyphosate in the drug that's causing the problem. And so it's going to be a protein that has glyphosate embedded in it, which makes the protein really toxic. I mean, it becomes, and then of course the immune system tries to respond, and the immune response gets also broken by the glyphosate. This is the part that I'm realizing recently that's just amazing. And it has to do with the whole mechanism by which an antibody is developed. It's very fascinating biology in terms of the immune system. The immune system is quite amazing. And it has these, the immune cells have these somatic mutations that go on that allow them to create these novel proteins. They have to create these incredible rich repertoire of different proteins that are the actual antibodies to find one that's going to perfectly match an antigen. So an antigen could be, for example, a gluten protein, a piece of gluten, and the antibody is trying to match that gluten so that it can tag it and to tell the immune cells to clear it. You know, it's a mechanism that is sort of like putting a red light on that and say, hey, here's one over here, here's one over here, hey, clear these. You know, it's telling the immune cells, the macrophages, to clear it. And those antibodies get perfected through a process that gets disrupted by glyphosate. This is what I believe. When you look at the situation with the glycines, that's what you can expect to happen. It's really, truly amazing because glyphosate, it appears to me that glyphosate, Anthony and I wrote about this actually in our first paper. We wrote our first paper on this idea of glycine substitution. It was the 5th paper in our series of 6. We've done 6 so far. We're working on a 7th one right now. And in the 5th paper, we talked about glyphosate as a glycine analog. And we went through all the different proteins that could be explained. You can explain obesity, you can explain diabetes, autism, Alzheimer's. All of these diseases can be explained directly by specific proteins that are going to get badly affected by glyphosate substituting for glycine. It's truly amazing.
Wow. And the fact that, like you're saying, it's everywhere. So, you know, we're being exposed to it. So how are we being exposed to it? Like, in what substances are we being?
Everywhere. I mean, everything. The tampons, the clothing, you know, the drugs, as I said, the vaccines, the food, the air, the water. I mean, for example, think of gasoline. And I haven't proven this, but gasoline contains ethanol now, 10% ethanol. The ethanol is derived from GMO Roundup Ready corn that's sprayed with glyphosate routinely. So you can imagine that there's glyphosate in the gasoline. So you've got all these cars driving on the highway burning glyphosate. What is that going to do? I don't know. You know, it's possible that's a major factor. I don't know.
So in terms of
nobody's looked.
So in terms of the air, is that the only way it could be getting in the air, you think?
Well, then the food, it's all over the food supply. I mean, there's all, you know, you can't eat a meal without getting glyphosate in your food. And of course the US government has been extremely irresponsible in testing it, but the Canadian government tested over 8,000 samples of different foods under pressure from a person who's a friend of mine, Tony Mitra. He's amazing. And he's a Canadian. He's an activist, and he's been working with the Canadian government for a long time. He finally got them to do this. He wrote a book. They gave him the data. He wrote a book called Poison Foods of North America. If you want to know which foods have how much, buy that book. It's got a lot of tables. And what he found was that, so Canada was looking at their own food as well as imports from other countries around the world. Interestingly, consistently, they found much lower levels in imports from Mexico compared to US and Canada. Canada had sky-high levels in lentils and chickpeas. You've got that up there, Poison Foods of North America. It is amazing. It is so shocking.
Wow.
And of course, you have it so it's not just the GMO crops. That's the thing, because they spray a lot of crops right before the harvest, including wheat. They spray wheat before the harvest with glyphosate. That's why there's high levels in wheat. A lot of wheat-based products, Oreo cookies,
I've heard about
little,
the Oreos.
Goldfish crackers. I mean, all these popular foods for children. Yeah, Oreo cookies, goldfish crackers, Cheerios, you know, various cereals. I mean, it's just all these foods that children like are highly contaminated with glyphosate. And the lentils and the chickpeas are through the roof. I mean, Anthony saw the highest, not Anthony, Tony Mitra, getting them all mixed up here. They're both Tony. Tony Mitra had the highest level, Canadian government found the highest level in lentils and chickpeas from Canada. And Tony's in India right now. He's amazing. He's been working hard on the Indian government to try to get them to become aware that Canada is selling them poisonous food in terms of the lentils, because India imports a lot of lentils from Canada and from Australia, all of which are highly contaminated with glyphosate.
Wow. So going back a little bit to the mechanism of action inside the gut, you're talking about how it destroys the beneficial bacteria in the gut and the gut microbiome. So when it does all that, is that the only thing that it's doing, or is it doing, I'm sure it's doing other things besides just killing the beneficial bacteria, right?
Well, it's doing a ton of things. One of the issues is chelating minerals, because it's a very negatively charged molecule. It binds to particularly +2 minerals like calcium and magnesium, cobalt, manganese, selenium, all these important nutrients, iron even, but all these minerals that you need in very small amounts. You need trace amounts They do really important things with certain enzymes. Like cobalt, for example, is essential for cobalamin. Cobalamin is essential for methylation. Glyphosate disrupts the gut microbes' ability to synthesize the aromatic amino acids. This is the direct hit on the shikimate pathway. That's the famous mechanism by which glyphosate kills plants, is through this pathway called the shikimate pathway. That produces the aromatic amino acids. Tryptophan, tyrosine, and phenylalanine. Those are precursors to all kinds of really important biological molecules like melanin, the sleep agent, melanin. Melatonin, melatonin, the sleep agent, melanin, the skin tanning agent, skin tanning, melanin. Mm-hmm. And melanin and melatonin. So melatonin is a hormone that is for sleep, and melanin is the skin tanning agent that gives you a tan. Serotonin, which is really important for your mood. So low serotonin is associated with violent behavior. And thyroid hormone, and we have a mess with thyroid. Thyroid is one of those things. Thyroid cancer is going up exactly in step with the rise in glyphosate usage. And we have a lot of people who have Hashimoto's thyroid, autoimmune thyroid disease. Thyroid hormone, as I said, cobalamin depends upon cobalt, which glyphosate makes unavailable. But all those other guys, they depend on that shikimate pathway. The microbes make those aromatic amino acids for us, for the host. So when they can't make it, we become deficient. And then we become deficient in all these things, including folate, which is, of course, really important for methylation. So glyphosate really screws up methylation because it interferes with methionine synthesis. It probably interferes with the extraction of methyl from glycine. And because there's a pathway there that requires glycine, then glyphosate is going to mess up anything that glycine gets involved with because of it being a glycine analog. And then it messes up the folate, which is essential for methylation as well. So it really messes up methylation. And when you get hypomethylation in a cell, you turn it into a cancer cell. And that's one thing I'm seeing, is that I suspect glyphosate is stripping away the methyl groups in the B cells that are trying to produce these antibodies. And it's causing them to make fuzzy antibodies. The antibodies are not sharp because it's messing up this protein, which is called AID, activation-induced deaminase. This protein, I think, is absolutely crucial and a critical piece of the story with respect to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which comes out of those B cells. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a B cell. Well, this B cell, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, is one of the ones that's really been linked to glyphosate in terms of the farmers and whatnot. There are studies that have shown that it's statistically related. Again, that's the correlation issue.
Wow.
But I think the B cells are getting messed up. They're not able to make antibodies that are sharp, which means they're causing autoimmune disease because they don't accurately match the thing they're trying to tag. But unfortunately, then they can match something like a human protein and cause an autoimmune attack on human proteins. And that's what you see with celiac disease. You see attack on human proteins in the gut, and that's what's causing the inflammation that's causing the symptoms of the disease.
Wow.
But they're going to end up, this AID is super important because it causes DNA mutations. And normally, that's this activation-induced deaminase. Normally, it causes mutations specifically in those proteins that are going to become antibodies. It works on those antibody proteins. But if it gets messed up, it can start causing mutations in all kinds of other proteins, which is what happens. They're seeing that in things like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They're seeing that this AID is getting into the nucleus and attacking the wrong proteins. It's a rogue version of the molecule that's attacking the wrong proteins and causing cancer because it's causing mutations in the critical proteins that lead to the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's truly amazing. It's messing up both. So it causes autoimmune disease and immune deficiency as well as cancer, all three on the basis of disrupting this protein AID.
Gosh, this is just unreal. Stay tuned there, Stephanie. I'm gonna do a quick little spot for one of our sponsors, but my goodness, this is just absolutely incredible what we're learning about glyphosate. So maybe when we get back from the little break that we're going to do, maybe we'll ask some questions from the chat room. If you have any questions in the chat room, either on YouTube or on Facebook, make sure to type them in all caps in about a minute or two from now so that I can go back and scan through those and read them pretty easily. Whew, unbelievable. So maybe when we get back, I want to also ask her about birth defects and things like that. So that should be really, really fascinating. This is episode 596. So when this show does go live on the podcast version, you can go to extremehealthradio.com/596, and we'll put all the links and the show notes and all that good stuff together there if you want to grab those. I wanted to tell you really quickly about this Juve light therapy that we're using in our home right now, and you can see pictures of us using it. And it's really quite an incredible device because it works on your mitochondria. Actually, it's not coming through right here really quickly right now. It actually works on your mitochondria, and light is one of the most important things that you can expose your skin to, the photoreceptors in your skin. And blue light toxicity is a real problem in today's culture because what's happening is blue light's destroying our melatonin levels, it's destroying our DHA levels in our body, it's destroying our respiratory proteins on the DHA, it's destroying our hormone levels. Blue light is it's everywhere, and it's extremely highly toxic to us. And unfortunately, we've just been going down this road of backlighting all of our electronic devices using blue light. And so the antidote to blue is red light. And so this is what's amazing about this Juve light therapy. It helps to build collagen. It helps your mitochondrial health. It helps circulation. Light therapy is absolutely one of the most beneficial things you can do, is learning how to optimize your light environment. And the Juve is one of the ways I've been doing that, as you can see in this crazy orange photo here. So make sure to check out that in our store if you guys are interested. And speaking of light, I also wanted to tell you guys about this Symbiotica DHA really quickly. DHA is one of the ways to hold on to more light, actually, is increasing your DHA levels in your body, and it helps to turn that into electrical voltage in the body. So as Dr. Jerry Tennant says, healing is voltage, right? So DHA is the way to allow your body to carry that electrical charge. DHA is important for brain and nervous system health, and now Symbiotica has it combined with astaxanthin to further allow yourself to preload light and to hold on to more light on your solar panel, which is your skin. So really big fan of what Matt is doing and Chervin over at Symbiotica with this DHA, algae-based DHA, which is really cool. So if you use the code EHR, you'll get 15% off, and check out the Juve light as well. So all of this stuff with the glyphosate and with everything that's going on is really starting to, gosh, it kind of makes you really bummed out. Is there any way that we can, is eating organic enough, do you think, Stephanie? Or do you think that eating
I don't
organic?
think it's enough. I don't think it's enough, but it's a good start. I certainly do.
Yeah.
We don't buy anything at the grocery store unless it's organic, including the spices, the wines. I mean, everything that we eat, we buy organic.
Wow.
And we've even been buying organic cotton clothing.
Yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask you.
For children.
Yeah, for children, it's really important, right?
I wonder about eczema, because a lot of kids have problems with eczema these days. And cotton, I always bought cotton clothing for my children because it's natural. Cotton's very toxic, and it's also, cotton goes into food as cottonseed oil, and it doesn't qualify as a food crop, so they're allowed to use more toxic chemicals on the cotton. It's not just the glyphosate, there's other things on there as well. So cotton is really unfortunate that you have to worry about your clothing. Tampons, of course, I'm really quite disturbed about the idea of tampons. Tampons have been tested and found contaminated with glyphosate. And I mentioned the vaccines, which I think is just horrific, injecting glyphosate into a child in a vaccine. I just can't imagine. Gosh. I think it could account for the correlation between MMR and autism.
So what's going on with the glyphosate? Is it just at this point, is it a type of thing where Monsanto is just sort of denying what it does, and it's able to be used, and we're just continuing on?
It's amazing.
What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, I think Monsanto has done a terrific job of convincing the legislators that we don't need to worry about glyphosate. And this makes it very hard for individuals to believe what I'm saying. I think there's a level of disbelief that it's easier to just dismiss me and say that I'm just, maybe a lunatic or something, than it is to take this seriously. But when you look at the evidence, it's overwhelming, and it's messing up a lot of the animals. You can see it everywhere. For example, the problem with the blue-green algae in Florida, that you've probably heard about the issues they're having with the overgrowth of the cyanobacteria. Those bacteria are among the few species that are able to metabolize glyphosate. They can break the CP bond, which is a difficult bond to break, and they can use that phosphorus as a source of phosphorus for their growth. So while the other species are being killed by the glyphosate, they're thriving on it. And that's why they overgrow, and then they feed the red algae that cause the red tide. You get a real mess there just from the glyphosate that's being used on the sugarcane crops that are all around that Lake Okeechobee in Florida. I think that just is really a very clear piece of the puzzle. Of course, they're using these phosphate fertilizers and nitrate fertilizers as well that are helping to fuel those algae. But I think the glyphosate is a major piece of that puzzle.
Wow, that is just so crazy to, just to think that it's everywhere like that. It's in their clothes, it's in the air, I never thought about the connection you had with gasoline. I mean, that's,
yeah. We don't know. I mean, no one's looked at that. So I'm not saying it's absolutely true, but it just makes sense to me that it would be. And it's pretty terrifying when you think of burning it, and releasing that glyphosate into the air.
Right.
You think of a highway, and kids who live near highways have an increased risk to autism. That might be due to their breathing the glyphosate.
Well, something else I just thought of too, as you said, as you talked about that, was this phenomenon called, tire dust, and coming off of cars, and all of this pollution coming from tires and on the roads. And I'm wondering, living near an airport where the tires of the airplane, of the wheels, skid and create that smoke. And I'm wondering, those are made from oil as well, right? So is there a tie there?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's the ethanol from the corn that I'm expecting. In Brazil, they do ethanol from sugarcane that's sprayed with glyphosate right before harvest. So I think you're going to have glyphosate in that ethanol. I would just be surprised if you didn't,
Is there any, in terms of this stuff, like you said, maybe in your clothes, or maybe, it's kind of getting everywhere, but is it always going to be damaging? Like if it's in your clothes, is it always,
Who
really
knows?
bad?
I mean, I don't know. I think it could be causing the eczema. We have an epidemic in eczema among our children today. Probably lots of reasons, but I think wearing cotton clothing is possibly a contributing factor. There's all these questions. I'm just throwing these things out as ideas. I haven't proven anything here.
Right.
It's all just speculation. I admit that. But someone needs to be looking at these things. The government is sleeping on the job. They should see that our children are sick. We have incredibly high, over 50% of the kids have some kind of autoimmune disease, some kind of food allergy, or they're obese, or they've got depression. I mean, you've got 11-year-old kids killing themselves, committing suicide. We have got something really, really wrong in our society.
Yeah.
And we need to face up to that. And I think we need to acknowledge that glyphosate, in my opinion, glyphosate is a big piece of that puzzle. We have a lot of other chemicals, and they're all working together to cause harm, so it's hard to say which one is the worst, but I would bet my money on glyphosate as the worst one, and mostly because it's so pervasive and it's used carelessly because we don't think it's toxic. We're not taking care to protect ourselves from glyphosate at all. We don't even know where it is because we haven't bothered to test. So we're really in a situation with a lot of unknowns. And
it's insidious because, my wife just gave birth, 8 weeks ago. So 2 months ago, to twin baby boys, our first kids.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited. But, it's crazy. It was one of the things that our gardeners came by, and they were, doing the weeds and stuff like that, and weed whacking all the grass. And then I look, and at this point, my wife is about 8 months pregnant. So she's ready to give birth anytime. And I look out in the backyard, and the gardener has that pack on his back filled with some kind of liquid.
Oh my God.
And he's spraying all the cracks right on our patio. So I run out there, and I tell him, hey, no, like, don't do this. And then he tried to explain to me it's okay. And I said, my wife is pregnant. And so finally he kept saying this. And I looked at him and said, my wife is pregnant, and that causes cancer. Because he wasn't accepting what I was saying.
Yeah, they're being taught that it's perfectly safe.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's the thing.
Yeah, and that's the problem. And it's sprayed on all the public sidewalks too. So
Dwayne Johnson, the guy who won the lawsuit, his job was spraying glyphosate on schoolyards. I mean, that just doesn't get any worse than that.
Jeez.
That was his job.
How much did Monsanto have to be forced to pay out? 289 million, I think.
289 million.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
Yeah, it's like 289 million, and of course that's a drop in the bucket for them. But I mean, I think hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be a tidal wave because there's over 10,000 coming along.
10,000.
10,000 additional lawsuits beyond his.
Wow.
It's going to be a total tidal wave. I mean, if it works, you know, and if the next one works, I mean, every time one works, then everybody else gets much more interested, right?
Yeah.
And Bobby Kennedy was one of his lawyers. He's awesome. And he just said, we're just going to keep taking them one at a time until something breaks, because, you know, we're just going to do this. And I think it's just like the cigarette industry. It's so many parallels. I wanted to say Anthony Samso has a hold of a whole pile of documents from Monsanto that were never published. You know, he got them through the EPA, and one of them in particular is a paper by Lankus and Hogan. I have it written down here, 1981. 1981, Lankus and Hogan did a study on rats, and they found, and I just gathered up the numbers. They looked at lymphoma in different tissues, all these different tissues, and when you accumulate all the numbers, the control group had 0. They had 3 different levels of contamination of exposure of glyphosate. At the lowest level, there were a total of 2.
Okay.
The next level, there were 5, and the highest one, 17 different cases of lymphoma in these rats exposed to the glyphosate. Extremely clear evidence to me that glyphosate causes lymphoma from Monsanto's own public, you know, they didn't publish it, but it's a secret document that was written in 1981. I mean, it goes all the way back to 1981. I think it is insane that we're still at this point believing that this chemical is safe.
Well, it's crazy because Monsanto just changed their name, right, to something like Bayer?
Yes,
or something?
so they got bought by Bayer, and Bayer immediately lost the name. That's the first thing they did.
Well, I mean,
and I wanted to talk about another study actually that Monsanto did. You know, Anthony has these studies, and it's helping us to figure things out. And this one was on bluegill sunfish. This one is quite striking because I think it argues that glyphosate gets into proteins by mistake in place of glycine, which is the thing that Monsanto absolutely denies. They say this is not possible. And most people say, oh, good, that's very fortunate that this isn't possible. And everything that I'm saying, you can ignore that because it's not possible. Well, they did this study on bluegill sunfish, and they exposed them to radio-labeled glyphosate so they could track the radio label. And they looked at the tissues, and they found radio label in the tissues. And then they measured for glyphosate using standard methods. And they came up short. Only 20% of the radio label was detected as glyphosate. So 80% is missing. So they got the brilliant idea of adding digestive enzymes to break down the proteins in the tissue. And after they applied this proteinase K, which is a digestive enzyme, they increased the yield up to 80%. From 20% to 80% of the radio label was now able to be seen as glyphosate. And they said themselves that perhaps the glyphosate was incorporated into the protein. That's their words, incorporated into, which is exactly what I'm saying. The glyphosate is going into the protein by mistake in place of glycine. And even the shikimate pathway, the very pathway that glyphosate disrupts, that they say is, you know, what causes toxicity to plants, it's a particular enzyme in that pathway. That enzyme has a particular place where it builds a pocket that fits its substrate called PEP. That pocket contains a highly conserved glycine residue in that molecule. And there are multiple species of plants and multiple species of microbes that have discovered independently that if they swap out that glycine, they change the code and they turn it into alanine, a very simple change on the DNA code, then that protein becomes completely immune to glyphosate sensitivity. It no longer is sensitive to glyphosate. And that's the basis for the GMO Roundup Ready crops. It's a mutation in the DNA code that gets rid of a glycine at that active site. It's really about the most striking evidence I've seen that supports the concept that glyphosate is substituting for glycine during protein synthesis. This is the thing that makes it insidiously, cumulatively toxic in such a way that you don't easily connect the dots because it takes time. Over time, various proteins in your body get disrupted, and eventually something breaks and you get really sick.
There's a good question from Diane in the chat room, and she wants to know, but I want to ask something else first, but she wants to know, how can we remove it from our water system? So I want to get to that question. But in your mind, do you think like what's going on in, you know, at the upper levels of Monsanto? Do you think that they have an exit plan with Monsanto, or do you think that they're doing this on purpose, or is it just a money play where they're like, now that we know it's so bad, now we can't back out because then we have to admit that we were poisoning people? Like what do you think's going on their side mentally, do you think?
I know it really amazes me, their ability to simply destroy the messenger. I mean, their strategy is to make sure that anybody who dares to say that glyphosate's toxic gets their reputation ruined. I mean, that's their strategy. They won't let you publish. They really are able to manipulate things so that you're portrayed as someone who's just crazy. And that's what's happening to me. Yeah, I'm a crazy person. That's fine. If they want to do that, that's okay with me. Because what can I do, right? I'm just hoping people will listen to me. Some people, at least, will believe that what I'm saying and make changes. I think the hope is going to be switching to organic, and we're seeing a tremendous increase in organic food availability and also demand. I think the demand is really, really important. I think that one of the most important things that people can do individually to help rescue us from this situation is to buy organic food. Refuse to buy the food and they won't make it anymore. They're going to have to learn how to make organic food efficiently. They're ruining the soil anyway. The soil is becoming so bad, that the food no longer is nutritious. They're going to have to go back to organic. It's not just sustainable, but renewable organic methods that's going to improve the soil so that the food becomes more nutritious. We've got all kinds of nutrient deficiencies as well, and that's partly because of the glyphosate.
Right. Yeah, it's destroying all of that. Yeah, and the soils, I wonder about the soils too. From what Diane says on YouTube, what do you think, or can we get rid of this stuff from the water supply? Do you think it's possible?
Reverse osmosis is really your best bet in terms of a filter to remove the glyphosate. A lot of the filters don't actually work to remove it. It's a very small molecule, so it'll get through the small pores. But reverse osmosis, and that will take out all the minerals as well. So you're going to need to put the minerals back in.
Okay.
Because you don't want to have the minerals are important. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to get the bad stuff out of the water without also getting the good stuff out of it.
Right.
So that's tricky. I do recommend Acetobacter. Acetobacter is one of the few microbes that can break down glyphosate, which is quite interesting. And there's foods that contain Acetobacter naturally, like apple cider vinegar. So Bragg's organic apple cider vinegar, use that, make your own salad dressing.
Oh, wow.
And have a salad every night. I think that will help you to metabolize, to break down and clear the glyphosate that's in your food.
Well, that's interesting. I was watching it's interesting that you hear these different substances that have this effect on breaking down other substances, like what you just said with apple cider vinegar. I was watching a talk, you've probably seen it. What is his name from fungi.com? Paul Stamets, when he talked about mushrooms, and he was talking about, I guess he's got some sort of patented idea of how mushrooms can break down oil and clean up.
Interesting.
And I'm wondering if there's any connection between, mushrooms and being able to break down glyphosate.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I know that there's only a few. I mean, I've been looking for microbes that can break down glyphosate. And as I said, the cyanobacteria can. That's why they're getting flourishing in Florida and causing all this problem with the blue-green algae really all over the country. I mean, the Great Lakes have had issues. And I was reading even a lake in Kansas is having issues with blue-green algae. I mean, this is showing up because of the glyphosate contamination of these lakes.
Right.
But there's a Pseudomonas aeruginosa is another microbe that can break down glyphosate, and that's become a huge problem in the hospitals as causing things like sepsis, infections. So it's a bad guy, but it can break down glyphosate, and it might be a reason why it's becoming a problem, because it gets an advantage. Anything that can break down glyphosate gets an advantage in the gut. And Clostridia are much less susceptible to glyphosate than bifidobacteria and lactobacillus, which are the ones that are important. When the baby's born, the lactobacillus and the bifidobacteria need to thrive to create a healthy gut. And they both are strongly killed by, they are much more sensitive to glyphosate than Clostridia is. And so this is why we have a problem with Clostridia overgrowth. And that's associated with autism. A lot of the autistic kids have issues with excess Clostridia.
Do you think that glyphosate is so small enough, in fact, that it gets through into mother's breast milk and things like that?
Absolutely. In fact, that's been shown. Zen Honeycutt tested breast milk from several different mothers who were nursing. And I think she found glyphosate in 30% of them. And the highest level was 1,600 times higher than the upper limit allowed in water, drinking water in Europe.
Whoa, that's
1,600
crazy.
times higher. Yeah. And
wow.
And interestingly, there was a paper that came out shortly after that, claiming that glyphosate was not present in milk. And Anthony Samsel has looked at that paper, and one of the first things they did was to precipitate out the protein, which is going to remove the glyphosate, because the glyphosate's embedded in the protein. That's why we're getting an epidemic in casein intolerance. We have a whole bunch of people who are sensitive to dairy these days, dairy and gluten. All these people that are avoiding dairy, avoiding gluten, because become allergic to those proteins that are contaminated with glyphosate. That's what I think is going on.
Wow, that's crazy. It's funny, we have a lot of people talking about geoengineering and stuff like that, and glyphosate's in the air coming from planes and stuff. But I want to ask a question about one of the things someone was talking about on the Facebook. How can we remove? It's one thing to avoid foods that have it or clothing that has it, but can it be detoxified out of our body, do you think?
Well, there are things you can take that claim that they bind to it and then remove it through the feces.
Mm-hmm.
And that's things like organic matter from the soil, fulvic acid, not folic acid, but fulvic, Fulvic acid, and humic acid, which are these
Mm-hmm.
complex organic molecules from the soil.
Mm-hmm.
Those are recommended for binding to it. And also bentonite clay,
Mm-hmm.
similar thing with the soil. I mentioned the apple cider vinegar, and sauerkraut will also has acetobacter, and I think that yogurt does too. Kimchi, yogurt,
Those things.
various fermented foods. Fermented foods often contain acetobacter, which is very special because it can metabolize it. You really want to get things that metabolize it rather than things that just remove it, because if you take it out through the feces or through the urine, it's still there. It's going to go somewhere from that point, and who knows what it's going to contaminate next, right? It didn't go away. You need to break it down, and that's where you need these microbes. Apparently, ozone and chlorine and ozone can break it down non-enzymatically. I found a paper that talked about that, which is very interesting.
Really? That's fascinating. Yeah, because a lot of people do ozone therapy and use ozone, rectal insufflations and taking ozone in different ways.
I've noticed that, and I've really wondered whether what they're achieving is breaking down that glyphosate non-enzymatically. It's a very interesting thought. I say again, everything is so poorly researched. The government should be pouring tons of money into research on glyphosate right now. If they had any sense, they would, because they really need to understand that this chemical is so toxic they need to ban it. I will not be happy until glyphosate is banned worldwide. That's what I think. They need to stop manufacturing this monster chemical.
And it seems
worldwide.
like with the you doing shows like this, I know you do a ton of podcasts and radio shows, and the word is getting out and messages being spread. People are waking up, and it seems like obviously a company as big as Monsanto or our government, they're so massive and so big that it takes years for actually policy to change and to affect actual laws and daily lives of people. But I really do feel like, it's slowly but surely happening. People are waking up. I mean, that lawsuit was just, and apparently there's another lawsuit that's going on right now with over 400 people in a class action with non-Hodgkins lymphoma and Roundup as well. So it's happening,
Yeah, I really am excited about the lawsuit, and I think the lawyers were not willing to tackle this until they felt they had enough evidence, and now they think they do. And I think the case was so compelling with Dwayne Johnson. Monsanto still says everything was coincidental, but it's extremely hard to believe that when he got spills on his skin, and then he had all these nasty skin rash, following the spills, and then he got the lymphoma. I mean, it's just like it was so clear. The connection was so clear in his case, and he wasn't exposed to any other chemicals. Roundup was the only thing he was using. Right. So his was a really great case. A lot of the farmers are getting lymphoma, but they use so many chemicals that people can always argue that it's something else. Mm-hmm. So their cases are weaker for that reason. But I think his case was so perfect. And of course, also having two adorable young children and a very devoted wife. And, he was just the kind of person you really wanted to really angered people to see what had happened to him.
Yeah.
And I think that played in as well. And of course, working in the schoolyards, you think about the children that are being exposed I think they should absolutely not use glyphosate in schoolyards. I don't know what they could possibly be thinking of in doing that. It's the kind of foolhardy thing that is being done across this country. Public spaces, it's just terrifying to me, the amount of abuse with this chemical that's going on because we think it's safe. That's the issue. We think it's safe.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's terrible. I go through the neighborhood and I see the guys spraying the sidewalks all throughout the neighborhood. I see them spraying it in the park, in our neighborhood. I see it everywhere, and no one. It's just so crazy because we'll be walking our dogs and we'll see the guy over there and he's spraying it, and there's people getting in and out of their car, and no one's. It's not even like there's no thought.
People it's really I mean, it's a tribute to Monsanto that they were able to hide the toxicity of this chemical for so long. I mean, it's just amazing that they were able to convince everybody that it's not, that it's harmless to humans. And really, I mean, the bee problem, you know, we face this huge problem with the bees, and everyone's talking about the neonicotinoids, and they're correct. The neonicotinoids are really bad for the bees, but they're going to ban the neonics, and I predict it won't solve the problem because the glyphosate is working together with the neonics to take those bees down. And I'll bet you they're still going to have trouble once the neonics are gone.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. We just did a whole show with the beekeeper a couple days ago or last week about the bees. And I asked her about the colony collapse disorder. And she didn't mention glyphosate. And I didn't think about it
People
either.
People don't realize. Yeah. Don Huber has talked about that. And it's the same thing that's happening to us with the gut microbes. They're basically getting autism. They're getting what I would call bee autism. But their gut microbes get disrupted, and that disrupts the maturation process. They abandon the beehive prematurely and go out foraging before they should, because they need to be taking care of the next generation. And then they get confused. They get Alzheimer's basically, and they can't find their way back to the hive. You know, after they've been exposed to glyphosate, they get confused and disoriented.
It's crazy how small the molecule must be in order to affect a bee and then also affect a human, you know?
It's a tiny molecule. I mean, that's what most of the chemicals are, much more complex than glyphosate. It's a beautiful, really. I mean, it's this elegant solution to just make a fake glycine and then let it go loose, because glycine is so important. Glycine is not just because being a part of the proteins is absolutely incredible, and the different ways in which glycine plays an important role in proteins is amazing. But glycine is also a neurotransmitter, and glyphosate goes into the brain. This has been shown in studies, and it excites the NMDA receptors and causes neuronal burnout. It can cause real damage in the brain. And it also prevents the breakdown of glutamate. So you get glyphosate and glutamate together. Those two neurotransmitters together will overexcite neurons through the NMDA receptor. That's been documented in papers.
Wow. That's so fascinating. When I was, I was listening to someone talk recently about autism, and he was saying that there's a combination between three specific things that he's looking at in his research when it comes to autism. And he was saying glyphosate is number one, and he was saying vaccines are number two, and he was saying
I agree with him.
EMF.
I agree with him.
Issues, and he was saying the combination. So he was saying what happens is like, it's not just the vaccines. The vaccines sort of get turned on by the glyphosate, and that gets further turned on by the EMF. And so this is like unholy trinity going on with these three things.
It is absolutely the case. And in fact, the EMFs have been shown to cause calcium entry, calcium uptake by the cells. Glyphosate causes that too. Multiple studies have shown that glyphosate causes calcium uptake. Interestingly, I have found that there's a mutation in the calcium channel, single glycine mutation, that causes a syndrome called Timothy syndrome, a very severe syndrome. Children, and this has only shown up since glyphosate was on the market too. The first case was in the 1980s of this genetic mutation of a glycine getting turned into something else. I forget what it was, but anyway, it's not glycine in the mutation. And that child has severe disorder with autism is one of the symptoms of it. And they have like their heart, it's arrhythmia. They have like long QT syndrome, and the heart is messed up. This is because of this excess calcium. The calcium channel gets messed up in such a way that it forgets to turn off. So when it gets stimulated, it can't shut down, and it'll just suck calcium into the cell to the point where the cell gets destroyed.
Wow.
And it'll cause cardiac arrest. So these kids usually die by the age of 2 or 3 from cardiac arrest, and they have hypoglycemia because the calcium uptake in the beta cells in the pancreas cause them to release too much insulin. So they take away the sugar very fast out of the blood, and they can go into a coma from that. And then they have the autism because of the brain getting disrupted. It prevents the development of the dendrites, so it messes up the maturation of the neurons in the brain because of excess calcium uptake.
That's so crazy.
And the EMFs are going to trigger calcium uptake, and then glyphosate's going to make it worse.
Yeah, my gosh. I was just, a while back, I was listening to a guy, Professor Martin Paul, and he was talking about the calcium channel uptakes that happens inside the cell with calcium getting inside.
Yes, that's where I learned that from him, yes.
Yeah, he's a fascinating guy, and he was saying that there's, I forget how many different diseases and conditions happen as a result of too much calcium getting inside the cell. And I'm wondering, like, is EMF worse than glyphosate when it comes to allowing calcium to get inside the cell where it doesn't belong, or are they both equal in that regard?
Well, I don't know, but what's bad about glyphosate is that it disrupts the calcium channel so that it doesn't know how to turn off. That's the critical thing that glyphosate, I believe it does that by doing the same thing that Timothy syndrome does. It's that mutation in the glycine. So it's only going to happen in some of the calcium channel molecules because glyphosate is not going to get into all of them.
Right.
But if it gets into enough of them, there's going to be trouble, and calcium, the cell is going to suffer from calcium overload. And in fact, that's, I think, what's going on with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as well. The calcium overload triggers a phosphorylation cascade. And when this AID protein gets hyperphosphorylated, it gets too many phosphates, it actually starts causing cancer. It goes into the nucleus and starts attacking various proteins and, the genes for various proteins and causing the change of the cell into a cancer type cell.
Gosh, it's interesting. I've told this story before, but I'll just tell it to you. It's just, back before I knew anything about, natural health or how the body works, like in the late 90s, I remember going to my general practitioner doctor for, I forget, something small. And then this was about 5 or 6 years after my mom was diagnosed in 1995 with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So I asked him, I said, Doc, why do you think all these people are coming down with cancer these days? And he kind of just stopped and he looked at me and he didn't have an answer. And he said, well, it's probably because we have better testing.
I know. I just hate that. That's what they say with autism too. Oh, look, we don't have more autism. We just have better diagnosis. It's amazing that people can just dismiss these things that way. It really frustrates me.
Doesn't it?
It's just amazing that they just, everything can always be denied, because if people don't want to believe it, they won't. Yeah. But when you look around at the children and how sick they are and how much extra money is being spent in the school system to you have to hire a full-time nurse, to manage all these EpiPens. I mean, the kids are really, and the misbehavior too. I mean, a lot of depression among the children and misbehavior. They're hard to control. They have violent temper tantrums. It's just like the classroom is very unruly these days because their mental health is being messed up by the lack of those hormones that are coming out of that shikimate pathway.
What's crazy about the schooling system, as you're talking about that, I just thought about this, is that, a kid going to, some kind of elementary school, they're going to go outside and they're going to get glyphosate coming up off the grass, right? Then they come inside, they're going to be exposed to blue light and EMF and non-native EMFs inside. And then they're probably going to have a nurse there where they can get some kind of vaccine. So you're going to have that unholy trinity all there at the school.
Right. Yeah. Your commercial was interesting to me because it turns out that infrared light is a very special light that grows the exclusion zone. I don't know if you've talked to Gerald Pollack. Have you ever interacted with Gerald Pollack?
Yeah, he's been on the show. He's great.
Yeah, because he's the one that I learned this from one of his papers, that when you expose the body to, or in his experiments, they exposed this setup to infrared light, and they found that the exclusion zone water, which is that special structured water that's created by the sulfates in the blood, that grew by a factor of 4 in the response to the red light, the infrared light, which is going to be in the red light. They're going to have some infrared there, and that may be the beneficial. And one of the key benefits of the red light might be increasing that exclusion zone, which is going to actually increase the strength of the battery, which is going to supply more energy to the cells, because that exclusion zone is the basis of the battery, I believe, that supplies electricity to the body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it helps the mitochondria create ATP, and it just shrinks the respiratory proteins. I mean, light therapy is huge, but it's gosh, we're just bombarded every area of our lives with this whole glyphosate thing. It's like it almost feels like, you ever hear those times where people say, what happens to all the chemotherapy in someone's body when they urinate, and that goes into the public
I'm wondering
supply.
about that myself. That's another thing to think about.
Yeah, and so you wonder, the way you talk about glyphosate makes me think it's just as toxic as that, right?
Yeah, and it's pervasive. I mean, that's the thing. It's just so frustrating that you can't avoid it. And you can just do your best to try to minimize your exposure, but you can't avoid it. Mm-hmm. Everybody's exposed, especially in this country. I mean, we're the worst. We probably have the worst record of any country in the world, just in terms of the amount of glyphosate that's used per person in our population. Mm-hmm. It's probably the highest in the world. Canada comes close as well.
So when you talked about glyphosate interacting with other molecules and other chemicals and things. Do we know about its interaction with substances like fluoride or chlorine or anything like that?
Well, yes. I mean, we don't, but I suspect that chlorine. There's some very bizarre treatments that people are proposing. That, for example, ASEA, which is a chlorine-based product. I don't know if you've heard of it. People are using that ASEA, and I think it produces something like chlorine dioxide or hypochlorite. I mean, these things hypochlorite is produced actually by the immune cells in response to try to kill the microbes. So it's an antiseptic effect. And of course, it can be dangerous if you take too much. So you have to be very careful because it's very potent, but it can break down glyphosate non-enzymatically. So I suspect, as I said, the ozone superoxide, and these are sort of highly reactive oxidizing agents that can apparently break down glyphosate non-enzymatically, which is pretty amazing. So that may be a reason why people are finding them to be useful.
Yeah,
therapeutically.
There's a product or a substance you probably know about, made popular by is he escaping me? He's been on our show before. I forget what his name is, but it's
David
called
Sandovar?
No, it's called MMS.
MMS, yes.
Yeah. What's the name
Magic,
of that guy?
right?
Yeah, Miracle Mineral Supplement, I think. And
right. I know Carrie Rivera, who's a prodigy of his, and she treats people all around the world. She lives in Germany now. She got chased out of the United States basically because our medical system hates this stuff. They think it's very toxic, and they're very, against it. They'll make sure that you'll be terrified to take it if you live in this country. So she doesn't treat many Americans, but she has reversed autism in over 400 people, which is amazing. She's actually reversed the autism, and she has only succeeded in reversing autism if she gives them this as part of her treatment. Her treatment immediately starts with an organic diet and a high sulfur diet. I haven't mentioned that, but sulfur is really important, and it gets messed up by glyphosate. A lot of people become sensitive to sulfur because it messes up their the enzymes that manage toxic sulfur forms like sulfide. So sulfide and hydrogen sulfide gas can become a problem if your enzymes that metabolize sulfur aren't working properly. But sulfur is super, super important for the blood, for the circulation.
Right.
And but her whole program is quite fascinating, and she's just done amazing things with her patients and around the world. Very few from the United States because our government has made it. Our people in America hear about her stuff and get scared because it's being trashed.
Yeah.
She includes this.
Oh, I'm sorry. She was fortunate, or we were fortunate enough to have her on our show a while back. And I think at the time she was in Mexico, but I didn't know she had been run out of there too and probably went to Europe. That's crazy.
Yeah, she's in Germany now, and she's thriving, and she's treating so many people, in the Far East and South America, and having great success. So, power to her. I really think she's awesome, and I think it's just tragic what this country does to people who actually find a solution. It's so important for us to find out how to reverse autism. And it's absolutely fantastic that you can reverse autism. It's so amazing to me. That was the big question I had in my mind from the get-go, is whether it could be reversed, because you might think it's a permanent damage kind of situation. But apparently in some people it's not. They're sort of like in a suspended state where they can get their brain back if they're with the right treatment. And it's just a question of figuring out what that is.
Yeah, it's fascinating because I was talking to a doc off the air a couple of years ago when we did a show, and he was telling me about some research that he was doing based on a guy in, I think, somewhere down in Australia. And he was doing able to reverse the symptoms of autism for 2 weeks with rectal. It was what is it called? It's like a probiotic from the feces of children who have never been exposed to glyphosate or any kind of toxic chemicals or vaccines. And so the kids that have been treated with this
very interesting.
Their whole thing was being reversed in 2 weeks, and then it will come back again. So it ties to what you were saying with glyphosate and the gut issues and the bacteria,
Yeah, as soon as you change the diet. I mean, some people have had remarkable improvement by changing the diet, just going to the organic diet. That can make a huge difference in some people with the autism symptoms.
Wow. That's
So,
amazing. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for being on our show.
thank you.
What can people do? Do you have a website? Do you have anything that you want people
Yes,
to
I
do?
do. I mean, my website at MIT has a lot of stuff on it. So you can go, it's very techy looking. It's not fancy, but I just have a lot of things posted there. A lot of slideshows from various presentations that I've given and papers that I've published. And so that's http people.csail, CSAIL. That's my lab, Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory, .mit.edu/Seneff, Seneff. That's my last name.
Okay.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of, you can see there's all kinds of things to read there if you're, and of course, if you just Google my last name, Seneff, you'll find all kinds of, looking in podcasts or interviews like this one, video interviews, presentations. There's a lot of stuff available. And I've published articles on other websites like Mercola and Green Med Info. I've published articles there. So there's a lot of material.
Yeah, your website. I was just looking at it. Like you said, it's very techy, but at the same time, you have links for everything, don't you? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of links, and you can find all the papers that I've published in peer-reviewed journals if you want to go deep into the biology of the story. I would love to see someone, if someone's listening that has the expertise to go study this idea of glyphosate getting into proteins by mistake in place of glycine. We need somebody to prove that it's happening. That would really be a game changer. And I've had trouble getting any chemist interested in doing that because I think they probably believe it will wreck their career because of the pressures from Monsanto. Monsanto does not want the world to know this. If it's true, it's game over for glyphosate. And Monsanto knows that. And that's why they're going to be very determined to make sure that people don't believe what I'm saying.
Would it be possible, do you think, for some independent chemist or researcher to be able to find this out, prove something in some way, or does there need to be, placebo, double-blind, and studies and all this kind of stuff, or can it be done by private people doing their own research? Do you think, or would that not be believed?
I'm hoping so. I mean, there are things one could do, and I have some ideas, but unfortunately, we don't have time right now because I need to go. So I guess we're going to have to hold that for the next time.
Yeah. Well, Stephanie, thank you again so much. You rock. Your work is amazing. Thank you for sharing it with us and with our listeners. It's just so cool. So we'll send them over to your website. Does that sound good?
That sounds great. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, Stephanie, enjoy the rest of your day over there in Kauai, okay? You're making me jealous.
Thank you so much. Yes. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
All right, there you go. Stephanie Seneff. My goodness. How far does this glyphosate rabbit trail go? Oh, man. Unbelievable. Well, what do you guys think? Let me check out the chat room and see what you guys think about that. In the meantime, Michael Wisdom says miracle mineral solution in the chat room. That was what we were talking about. Well, before we go into the little wrap-up, I want to share with you a couple more things about light, and you can probably see if you're watching the video version of this podcast right now. You're seeing I'm wearing the blue blocking sunglasses, and as Stephanie mentioned during the show, that light is very, very important. Infrared, far infrared, IR, UV, all of it is super, super important, especially when it originates from the sun. Unfortunately, we're living under an alien sun these days. Caught, blue light everywhere from our devices to our TVs to everywhere. And I've been trying to sort of rattle the cage and tell people that light is more important than food. And I really believe that. Light is more important than food because all the food, the entire food web is tied to photosynthesis, which is directly tied to light. So blue light causes all kinds of disease. According to Dr. Doug Wallace, who is sort of the foremost authority on mitochondrial health, he's out of the Children's Hospital in Philadelphia. He's saying that upwards of 85% of all, let me take these off my earbuds, 85% of all disease is tied to mitochondrial damage, which is tied to light. And so it's really a big deal, this light thing, guys. It's really, really a big deal. It's just as big as glyphosate is this non-native EMF that we're being exposed to on a daily basis. So I am always wearing these glasses. There's a whole strategy that I have that I share inside the Extreme Health Academy about how I mitigate and use light, because light's coming off our computer screens. It's coming off of all of our indoor lighting has way too much blue light in it. That's causing melatonin damage. It's causing disruptions in our hormones. It's causing DHA levels to be lowered. It's causing the mitochondrial function to be altered. And what is the problem is that our mitochondria is what gives orders to the DNA to replicate correctly. And so people think, oh, the genes, I have the BRCA1 gene for breast cancer, or I've got the gene in my family for this, that, or the other. But what happens is the genes take orders from the mitochondria. So it's the mitochondria that controls genetic expression. So the number one way the mitochondria is affected and altered is through light, through the photoreceptors in our skin and in our eyes, the melanopsin in our eyes, and the central retinal pathway that takes the light from our eyes to our pituitary and to all of our different hormonal systems. And so if you care about your health, if you care about your brain health, if you care about your nervous system health, if you care about your longevity, your ability to have a properly functioning immune system, the first thing to start with is blocking blue light from your life and from your eyes. It's super, super important. So I just wanted to share with you these blue blocking glasses. We had Andy Matt on the show a while back, and he was really cool. Really cool guy. Love supporting him. And these are the glasses that I'm wearing now, the blue blocking glasses. And I would highly recommend checking out the blue blocking glasses and learning more about them. And then the other thing I want to tell you about, I don't know if you've checked it out, is the IMRS Pmf device. This is a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy device. We've had Bryant Myers on the show a couple times, and we talk with him. And using light, water, and magnetism to your benefit. And that's really ultimately when it comes down to our health, is light, water, and magnetism. This is a pulsed electromagnetic field therapy pad, low dose, that you can use every single day. And PEMF has been shown to reduce muscle tension, circulation, improve sleep, reduces stress. I mean, the list of what PEMF can do is pretty amazing. And it's one of the things, according to Dr. Martin Paul, helps to eliminate calcium from inside the cell. So PMF therapy is huge, and I love the IMRS mat. I lay on it. You can lay on it twice a day for 8 minutes, and it's timed to the time of day, so you get different frequencies depending on what time you use the mat. And it's great because you can do your yoga on it, you can read on it, you can stretch on it, you can do meditation on it. It's really a great thing. So we'll share. I'll put a link to that in the chat room. But if anybody has any other questions about what we do, or blue light, or glyphosates, I'll put this in the chat room as well. We're doing a lot of cool shows, and it's our goal here at Extreme Health Radio to get to the bottom of this stuff, to figure out what's really going on, what's happening to our bodies, what's happening, why are we getting so many diseases in today's culture. There's a reason for it. There's definitely a reason for it. And it's not just better testing. Unfortunately, medical doctors don't know. They're not up on the latest research. They're just not. And they don't have time to be. I mean, you can't blame them. I mean, they have to keep a certain amount of people coming in that door. They have to, keep their practice busy and pumping and going so that they can pay for the lifestyle that they've, sort of put together. So I don't blame doctors. I really don't. I blame the people higher up. But ultimately, really, we've chosen to live in a world where these people are the perceived authorities. So it's ultimately comes down to decisions we've made. And I believe that we make a conscious decision to be here in this world before we are born. That's just my opinion. A lot of people may not agree with that, but I believe that we make sacred contracts, and we, like Carolyn Mace talks about, we drink from the river of forgetfulness before we're born. And so we chose to come in at a time like this, where there's all these people dying and people being exposed to toxic chemicals. And we've chose this. This is what we chose. And so, it's something that I believe in. And as a result of that, ultimately, everything comes down to decisions we've made. So, I really wanted to have Stephanie on the show to talk about this because it's super important. And I like some of her ideas. So some of her ideas were reverse osmosis water, which is great. Sulfur, that product ASEA, and we didn't talk about Dr. Zach Bush's product called Restore for Life. That's another product that, according to Dr. Bush, helps to bind to glyphosate molecules and secrete them out of the body. So we'll talk to him. He's going to be on the show pretty soon, Dr. Zach Bush. He calls it it's been called Restore for Life. That is the antidote for glyphosate. So I take it. We put our kids on it. So it's something very powerful. Water, you want to make sure you have a reverse osmosis, according to Stephanie Seneff, which is cool because we promote the Omica 12-stage reverse. It's actually beyond reverse osmosis, but it's a reverse osmosis system, 12-stage, the most advanced system I've seen so far. And we combine that with 2 other filters as well because we don't want any glyphosate in our water. That is for sure. So if you're new to the show, got some cool shows coming up. I don't know if I mentioned this. We've got Angel Howerton coming up. We'll be talking with her about her journey of healing stage 4 uterine cancer. So that's coming up. Dr. Kayla Daniel, we'll be talking with her about secrets of detoxification. And speaking of non-native EMF and wireless radiation, which is increasing the cell's ability to uptake calcium, which is being shown to have over 100 different health implications. We're going to have Brian Hoyer on the show, and he's really got some cool solutions for EMF, protecting your home. So that's really, really important. One of the things I like to do in our home is to sleep on a Magnetico mattress pad, because that's basically bathing your biology in a field of magnetism, and that helps to push off the coming 5G, as well as all electromagnetic field radiation coming from the dirty electricity in the walls, as well as wireless radiation that's just coming in all around you. So that's why I love the Magnetico so much. But there's a lot of different things, and we're going to talk with Brian about that. And then we're going to have Dr. Donnie Wilson. We'll be talking about leaky gut and digestive conditions. So like what Stephanie's talking about is how important it is for your gut and digestion and your colon health to be optimal. All disease begins in the gut, and all disease can be cleared from the gut, I believe. So Dr. Donnie Wilson is going to be on talking about gut health. So that's going to be really cool. Yes, Patty, we talked about removing glyphosate from our bodies. We did talk about that. Thank you, Genevieve, on Facebook for sharing Stephanie Seneff's website. Someone needs to put together a better website for her to be able to aggregate all of that content, because she has such good content, but it's like she said, it's very technical. It would be good for someone to sort of organize all of that, I think. Really cool, though, man, the work that she's doing. Man, oh, man, oh, man. All right, guys. Well, I think I'm going to take off, and that's going to be the end of the show. If you're on YouTube right now or Facebook, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We would appreciate that. And I want to give you a couple different ways you can support the show, too. If you are interested in going to our store where we have the PMF pad, I put a link to it there. Shop around at some of the products that we have in our store. These are products that are vetted by us. You know, they're products that we use and we stand behind and support. So Jojo Bach, how's it going? She's been my friend on Facebook for years. No way. What a small world. So Jojo is friends with Angel Horton, who's going to be on our show talking about uterine cancer. And yeah, so the doctor we talked about, it's on our website. If you go to our website, you can see upcoming guests. There's a little tab, and in fact, you know what I'll do is I will show that right now if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook. But you can watch live right there on our website every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 10:45 a.m. Pacific time. But then under upcoming guests, I'm always going to be updating this, and that is Dr. Donnie Wilson, Healing Leaky Gut and Digestive Conditions, coming up on September 17th. So that's when we'll be talking with Dr. Wilson about that. So that'll be really cool. Okay, so anybody here? Jojo Bach, hi there, love you. Thank you, Jojo. I appreciate that. Connection between statin drugs, dementia, and Alzheimer's. Yeah, we just did a whole bit of research inside the academy on statin drugs, and there's a bunch of research showing the connection between statin drugs and so many different health conditions. It's unreal. And we're going to be having some doctor on the show talking about statin drugs here pretty soon. So that's a pretty poignant and timely question, Michael Wisdom on Facebook. So yeah, that's going to be really good. Statin drugs, man, that's another black hole. One of the issues, my friends, is to live your life in such a way to where you don't ever need to be monitored or under the care of a medical doctor. That's my goal, at least. So my goal is to not go to doctors, because here's the thing. It's like you look at it like a whirlpool, right? And you're at the very top, and when you're in the healthiest years of your life, probably when you're teenage years, 20s, you never have to go to the doctor because there's no need to go to the doctor, right? But what happens is that they start putting together this program of, if you're over 30, then you should have mammograms, or if you're over 30, you should have this test or that test. And so they try to hook you in. And it's that little hook. It's like you're walking down the street and you're walking next to a used car lot, and the car salesman kind of tries to hook you in. You know, it's like those people giving samples at health food stores, right? They try to start a conversation. That's what all this stuff is. These regulatory monitored ways the doctor tries to get you to go to the doctor it's a hook. It's trying to get you out of your normal living routine, and it's trying to get you under the care of a medical professional. And so you want to avoid that. At least I do. I don't want to be going to a doctor to get monitored. I don't want to be going to a doctor to get testing for this, that, or the other thing, because frankly, I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing the best to take care of myself as I possibly can. So once you start getting in that hook and they start getting you in there, then they start telling you all these things. And I tell you, this comes from firsthand experience. My mom recently, many of you guys know, I shared this on the show right now with Stephanie Seneff, she was recently diagnosed with a breast, I won't even use the C word, but there's some rogue cells, because I don't like to give people or give illnesses that we've been labeled and scared, using fear tactics to think about. I don't even like using the words that they provide to us. So she has some rogue cells going on in her breast, right? So when we went to the doctor, she went to a doctor about 2 or 3 months ago, and I did a whole podcast on it right when I came home. But what they do is they scare you. They do their best to scare you to death, and talking about all their little studies and all the different things, the chemotherapy and radiation and all this stuff. But what they're trying to do is they're used car salesmen. They're trying to get you to take chemotherapy because, in my opinion, I think that they are getting some kind of kickback from the pharmaceutical companies, from whatever. Because if the pharmaceutical companies are smart enough to give pediatric doctors, pediatricians, kickbacks for getting 80% or more of their clients, of their patients, vaccines, then they're smart enough to also do the same thing with oncology doctors, because it's a win-win for everyone in terms of profit. So this doctor, I'm looking at him, he said to my mom, here's how we're going to treat your cancer, and here's how we're going to cure it. I looked at him, I thought, cure, you can actually use that word. That's right, because he's a medical doctor. He can use that word, cure. Natural people can't use that word. That word is a demonic word. You can't use the word cure, right? So he said, here's how we're going to cure your cancer. And he goes through the whole spiel, and it's a pure sales pitch. And I'm seeing right through it, and I'm looking at him, and I asked him a few questions. I just gave him that extended stare because I wanted him to know that I know what he's doing. He's trying to give my mom chemotherapy and radiation because he either wants money or he really thinks it works. And if he thinks that chemotherapy and radiation works, shame on him, because he hasn't done the research. If he's in it for the money, then shame on him again, because he's in it for the money. And so it's a fear tactic, and that's what they use to sell people. And they'll get you going to doctors' offices, and they'll stand above you in the white coat and tell you about their studies, and they'll tell you how you need to be on this, that, and the other medication. So what we need to do, my friends, is to not get involved in any of that. But that comes with a caveat too, because I know people in my family who didn't take care of themselves, ended up getting a disease and dying as a result. And so can chemotherapy and can radiation, can that help? My mom's a living testament to that. She had all those things and over 22 years ago, and she's still alive. So it's not that it can't help, but it destroys and ravages your body. So I recommend always working on your health. Always have something that you're doing with your health, like, whether it's, learning how to ferment food and bringing more fermented food into your diet, or maybe it's learning how to work with mushrooms, or maybe it's like, I'm going to focus on this light piece because I understand how important light is to the body and how blue light destroys the body. So I'm going to start working on that. Or maybe I'm going to start working on detoxification. So you go out and you buy a sauna, like the saunas we have in our store, or you start working on getting doing a colon cleanse. Always have something that you're working on, reducing stress, increasing your exercise, getting outside more. Always have something that you're working on and looking to do more. And ultimately what it comes down to is getting back to nature, is reconnecting with nature. Michael says on YouTube, that's how they make most of their money, and I've been told by my best friend who is the doctor. Wow. So Michael, I'm curious, you're listening right now or watching on YouTube, that doctor who's your friend, has he told you ever that they get a kickback? Like it's 100% true? Because that's my suspicion, but I know it's true intuitively. I just know it. Because if I'm going to run the pharmaceutical companies, why wouldn't I do that? Of course. I would give doctors a kickback, a certain percentage for how many people they administer chemotherapy to. Why wouldn't I? It's a benefit for everyone, in terms of money if you're unconscious. I talked my brother out of chemo, but he did do radiation. He had a brain tumor, and they surgically removed it, but they said it was cancerous, so they wanted to do radiation and then chemo. But thankfully, I showed him videos of Dr. Bergman, exactly, and he refused chemo. His doctor got mad at him for turning down chemo and told him, wow. Oh, this is Jojo. Okay. My gosh. Okay, so Jojo, so here's the deal. If your doctor gets mad, if your pediatrician gets mad that your child doesn't want, or you don't want to give vaccines to your child, or if a doctor gets mad that you don't want to take chemotherapy, there's no reason for anger. If and only if there's no financial incentive for the doctor to give or to prescribe a chemotherapy or a vaccine, right? Because if there is a financial incentive there, then he wants to make sure that a certain percentage of his practice and his patients are going to be taking chemotherapy and radiation, or are going to be taking vaccines if they're a pediatric doctor. So it's wicked, man. It's wicked. If you read the book, what is it called? It's by Matthias Rath, and it's all about the cancer industry, and it's dark. It is dark. Does that mean that doctors are evil and they're in on it? I think the doctors are overworked and they're under-researched and they're overstressed and they don't have time to look at all the research. And I think they're basically pill poppers or pill pushers for the pharmaceutical industries. That's why they're there. They're the front-facing arm of the pharmaceutical companies, are medical doctors. Unfortunately, if you're a medical doctor, you probably know this. You probably intuitively know this deep down within yourself. And if what I'm saying is making you upset, I'm sorry, but that's the truth. That's not to say that you didn't get into the medical field without wanting to help people. But ultimately, over time, what happens is they get hijacked through the same way they're hijacking us, through the inability for us to control our own time. So in the doctor's case, that means research, and getting us, all of us, doctors included, in debt. So then you become a slave. So then you need to use your time to make money to pay off your debt, which reduces the amount of time you can spend researching and having any objective opinion. And on top of that, there's incentive for prescribing what they want to have you prescribe anyway, which is chemo and vaccines. So it's dark. This whole thing is dark. And what Stephanie was talking about on the show, I believe all of it's going to come to pass. I believe over time they are going to have studies that are going to prove everything she's laying out here. So like I said before, what it comes down to is taking care of your health on a daily basis. So you've got to look at every aspect of your life. You got to look at how you're living, your stress levels, the people you're around. Are you connected to your purpose? Are you connected to any kind of passion? Do you want to be doing the things that you're doing? Do you want to be working in the job that you're working at? Do you want to be married to the person you're married to? Do you want to be living the kind of life you're living? When you start to ask those questions, then it starts getting real. Because you can take as much turmeric as you want, but if you avoid those questions, no amount of turmeric, no amount of MMS, no amount of avoiding glyphosates, no amount of fixing your light environment is gonna really ultimately have an effect like answering those questions will. So, Jojo Box says, thank you. Oh my gosh. Same with vaccines. My granddaughter almost died after them. Oh my gosh. And then you say, thank you for your part, doing your part to inform us, and pray for your safety. Love your interviews. Thank you, Jojo. I appreciate it so much. You know, that's what we're trying to do is, you know, we can't solve all the world's problems, and it's not my goal or desire to do that. My goal and desire is to use alternative health and natural healing as one mechanism of the wake-up process. And we can wake up many different ways. We can wake up through looking at any number of different sort of aspects of life, right? You can, if you start researching any aspect of life, you're going to start realizing that we're systematically brainwashed and we're not told the truth. So you can look at history, you can look at science, you can look at religion, you can look at spirituality, you can look at natural health in the medical industry, you can look at how the school systems were created and set up by the Rockefellers. You can start looking at the educational system, look into the work of John Taylor Gatto. You can look at so many different aspects of life, science, all of it. Even things that are innocuous that you don't think are a big deal, like that they would be hijacked, like archaeology. You start looking into that long enough, you're going to start realizing we haven't been told the truth about how the world got here in these ancient civilizations. So it doesn't really matter. My goal with Extreme Health Radio is to shed some light on this natural health piece. Obviously, I have interests in all those other areas as well, where money's created, the debt-based economy that we're living in, all of that stuff, government, all of that stuff interests me. But my ultimate aim is to expose one mechanism of the wake-up process through natural healing, because it's so obvious. It's so obvious that your doctor wants you to be sick. It's so obvious that the sicker you are for the longer amount of time, the more money they make. And that's from a financial, pure capitalistic perspective. I can't expect anything less from unconscious people that are working in unconscious industries. That's just the way it is. That's okay. That's okay. The problem is thinking that they want to help you. Or the problem is also thinking that they are there to serve me to the extent that I don't have to take care of myself. I can just go to a doctor and they'll help me if something ever goes wrong. That's the collective amnesia and the collective unconscious that we're all spellbound under, is this idea that we have to, or that we can outsource our health to perceived authority figures who know more about our bodies and how they work than we do. So that's why it's super important to take full responsibility and full control over every aspect of our life, every aspect, and not outsourcing anything, as little as possible, because ultimately we create and manifest our own reality by the thoughts that we think, by the people we're around, by the actions that we take, and by the responsibility we take over every different area of our life. And when we start to recognize that and start to take full responsibility for everything that we say, think, and do and manifest, then our life starts to change. We start attracting people into our life who are really helpful, people that are really, want to help us, and people that are going to allow us to wake up more. And so this whole thing becomes a rabbit trail that you can go down that I highly recommend, and life starts to become exciting. You start realizing, wow, like they're not telling us the truth about how, glyphosate affects the body, and maybe people are dying as a result of this. Then for those of you that are activists, then you can have something to go out and sort of make more awareness. I wouldn't say fight, because it's never good to fight things, but gives you some passionate area of life that you can focus on, which is amazing, and that's what we need. But we're under a state of collective unconsciousness where we're asleep and we're unable to sort of think rationally and think outside the box and pursue what's really going on in the world. And so do I think, I mean, I was going to bring up this during the show with Stephanie, is that I don't know if you guys have seen that creepy video with George Bush Sr. from 1995, I think, doing a tour of the facilities of Monsanto. And you hear them talking about George Bush giving Monsanto some legal tax loophole breaks to help them launch their new product or whatever it was. I mean, this is like, the government isn't there to help you. They're just not. The sooner we can recognize that and the sooner we can come to peace with that, the better off we're going to be. The doctors aren't there to help you. They might be good people and they might have started out as doctors to help you, but that's not why they're doing what they're doing. You know, ultimately, it's like that quote goes, you know, when it comes to work, you know, don't waste your whole life stressing over a job that would replace you in 2 weeks if they had to, right? Same goes with doctors. If you were to succumb to some kind of disease that your body has, life will go on for the doctor and they'll continue making their money. Life will continue to go on for Monsanto, who's continually poisoning people. So it comes down to, you need to take personal responsibility and I need to take more responsibility. And if we're suffering anything in our life as a result of that, then we need to recognize that. So that's why we put together the products in our store to help you optimize your biology. That's why we've set up the Extreme Health Academy to educate everyone with monthly courses and you know, weekly Q&A sessions where we answer all of your health questions. That's why we've set up all of that stuff so that we can give you the tools to be able to take control of your biology. Because I think if we were to remove all of these assaults to our immune system, I think it's possible that we could live until we're 150 years old if we desire, if we choose that. I really do. I really do. And not just that, and have your body look like it's like 60, 70 years old the whole time. I think that's really possible. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I help educate. I help spread the message of great people like Stephanie Seneff out there doing her great work and bringing all these programs to you, because it's my small part after I'm gone. I can say that I left a legacy here, and I can say that I left little tidbits of information that hopefully people will look at and help wake them up. And so that's why I do what I do, because I want people to not suffer as much. We've suffered long enough. I don't know about you guys, but do you notice that people are coming down with diseases younger and younger? You know, people are coming down with diseases younger and younger and younger these days. And it's because we're living a toxic lifestyle that's disconnected. And the faster we say yes to technology, the faster we say yes to GMO foods, the faster, yes, sorry, Neil deGrasse Tyson, you're wrong about GMO foods. But the faster we embrace all of these new things, the more unhealthy we're going to be as a culture, as a society. So my goal is to help empower everyone I possibly can. And that's, you know, it's not my responsibility what you do with that information, but that's my goal. Healthman says, my current health is leaky gut, SIBO, Lyme, and possibly co-infection. Where do I go from here? Oh, man. Well, there's a lot of things you can do for the gut. So, healthy man, you got to ask yourself why you have those conditions to begin with. So, ultimately, the first cause of all disease is spiritual in nature. And then it gets into the biophysics, and then it gets down to the physical, corporeal, tangible level. And so some things you can do on that level are colostrum is really great. That product by Restore, Dr. Zach Bush, Restore for Life. You can get that on Amazon, I believe. Colostrum, I like if you go to our store, I put links up in the chat room to our store if you guys want to check it out. But there's one from Surthrival that I take, and that's the one I recommend and like. There is the L-glutamine, something else you can take for the gut. MSM with the high sulfur content, as well as the aloe vera that we have in our store too from Stockton Aloe 1. That's incredible because that has a lot of sulfur binding compounds in it. So that's something. Bone broth is also something that I would look at for the gut. And then there's probiotics. Fermented foods. I like Living Streams probiotics. They have great stuff. Livingstreams.com, I think. We're going to have him on the show pretty soon. But that's some things you can do on the physical level with regards to your gut. And also avoiding lectins. Health Man, listen to our show that we just did on our YouTube channel with Dr. Stephen Gundry, and you'll learn all about lectins and how lectins are basically plant proteins that bind to sugar molecules on the receptor sites and on the cell membranes. And what happens is that those compounds make it through our gut and cause those tight junctions. Think of the tight junctions of your gut like in between your molar teeth. So in the gut, they should be really close together. But what happens is that when you eat plant lectins, those proteins make it their way through and then they get into the bloodstream, and that causes all kinds of issues. So while you're doing all that stuff, with regards to cleaning up or sealing your gut, you also want to make sure you're avoiding plant lectins. So Health Man, listen to the show that we did with Dr. Stephen Gundry a couple days ago. It's on our YouTube channel under videos. You'll see it. Lisa Wood, what do you guys think about the medical medium, Anthony Williams? Any thoughts? Yeah, he's been on our show. We've had Anthony Williams on the show. I don't know. My honest to goodness thoughts about Anthony Williams is I'm not convinced. I don't know. I'm not convinced. I think what happens is that we're drawn as a culture to look to other people to tell us things about ourselves that we should be already in knowledge of. And we have the knowledge of them. We're just disconnected from our own knowledge. That's why try to do a meditation for 10 minutes and see how hard that is. And that's how you can figure out if you're disconnected from yourself. So Anthony Williams, when we had him on, I was open-minded. And I'm still open-minded. But I don't know. I need to be more convincing or more convinced about Anthony Williams. Some people swear by him. He's very, what's the right word I should say? He's very charismatic. And he's very dogmatic and opinionated. But that doesn't mean that what he says is true either. But I enjoyed him. I think he's a great guy. Let's see. Michael Wisdom. The people. Let's see. Some really good comments going on. The people in the Bible that left several hundred years, that lived, I think you mean to say, several hundred years knew about food of the gods, monoatomic elements. Yeah, I think, Michael, I think you and I were talking about this on our last show, Ormus and monoatomic elements. Yeah, we did a whole show on Ormus. The pharaohs were fed conical cakes of the white powder gold, monoatomic gold. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Something very interesting was going on with that civilization. And why was it that people, if the Bible is true and people really did live till they're, 800-900 years old, what's going on with that we don't talk about in our culture, right? Why are there skeletal remains of giants that are 20, 30 feet tall? We're not told the truth about everything, my friends, just so you know. Loved your video about Shivambu with Brother Sage. He's a really cool guy. Yeah, we talked about urine therapy on that one. If you guys want all the latest shows, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel because our podcast, we're slowly getting caught up. Every 3 or 4 days, we're producing a new show on the podcast version. But the YouTube version is where you're going to get all the up-to-date stuff. Do you think Augenis von der Planets was onto something? I don't know. Some people say that he was taken out. But I think that he was. I don't think, to be honest, if you're going to eat meat, I think the healthiest way to eat it is to eat a non-hybridized animal that's also wild, that's also fresh, and the majority of the meat that you do eat is organ meat. That's the best way to eat meat, I think. Not cooked, not muscle meat, not from hybridized animals like chickens and cows. Especially not chickens and cows that have been raised in feedlots. Jezzy47 says, I think he's the real deal, but how could I prove it? It's just a gut instinct feeling. All the advice he offers seems right. However, I disagree with most supplements. Food is the way to go. Jezzy, are you talking about Augenis or are you talking about You must be, right? Because you said he, and Stephanie Seneff was the one we just had on our show. I can't take notes fast enough for some of the gut healing suggestions. Is there a written transcript of these videos? Lainey, let me just, I'll say them again. Afraid I won't be able to find the info, the video again to rewatch. Okay, so Lainey, I'll lay out a couple different things. There's obviously lots of things you can do for your gut. So the first one is going to be colostrum. And let me do this. www.extremehealthradio.com/shop. We have the colostrum in our store, and that's the one that I take personally, and that's the one I recommend. Colostrum helps to improve the immune system, and it helps to seal the gut. And those are the two sort of main things that it does for the body. Oh, okay, she was talking about not even that fast enough for these healing suggestions. I was talking about, but let's see. I was talking about the medical medium, but Augenus was onto it also. I think his balcony had been tampered with. Yeah, I don't know. Here's what I'll do. I'll do a little thing if you guys want to check out Augenus. So I'll put a link to episode. It was 73. So the way our show works, guys, is that if you do extremehealthradio.com / and then the number, then you'll see the show. So he was on episode 73. Medical Medium was on 403. So I'll put a link to that if you guys want to check it out. So 73 is Augenus Vonderplanus before he passed away, which was crazy. I'm glad we got him on before that happened. And then the medical medium was from a few years ago as well. And I'll put that in the show on YouTube as well in case you guys want to talk about that or listen to those. Much obliged for the link. It's what I was asking. Lainey, I'm not sure, were you asking about the gut healing or more about Augenus? Because the gut healing is what I can share a little bit about. One is the colostrum. That's the one thing I would take. The other is the supplement L-glutamine. We don't sell that, but you can probably get it on Amazon. And if you're watching, if you go to our homepage, Extreme Health Radio, we have an Amazon banner there. So if you want to click on that, that will help support any purchases you make on Amazon. We'll get a little commission that will help keep the show free. So we got colostrum, you've got L-glutamine, you've got, let's see, what was the other one? Bone broth. You've got MSM. You've got avoiding plant lectins, and you've got the Restore product from Dr. Zach Bush. And then Stephanie Seneff today mentioned apple cider vinegar. So those are some things you can do to start your gut healing protocol. But again, like I was saying before, if you're eating plant lectins that are destroying your gut and you keep doing all this stuff, like, colostrum and all that kind of stuff, it's not going to do any good because you need to seal the gut and avoid the foods that's going to cause the gut to become unsealed. So, Lainey says she's a member of the Extreme Health Academy. Awesome. So we'll do some research. Great. Lainey, you rock. I didn't know you were a member. That's great. That is very, very cool. So let me just give you a brief update on what's coming up. Got some cool shows. Stephanie Seneff was just today. Angel Howerton, her story about healing uterine cancer naturally. Dr. Kayla Daniel, Secrets of Detoxification, coming up on September 3rd. Brian Hoyer, EMF Solutions for Your Home That Actually Work. Dr. Donnie Wilson, Healing Leaky Gut and Digestive Conditions, on September 17th. So our homepage has an update on all the upcoming guests. So I think what I'll do is I'll head over to Facebook and see if anyone's commenting there. And if not, then I will close out this live show. Okay, if there's anything anybody else wants to ask me or have some comments on, let me know, and we can cover some things. If not, I will. I've actually been fasting today, so it's 12:45. I do a fast every day from around 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. every day. So that gives me about 18 hours of not eating any food, which intermittent fasting is one of the best things you could ever do for your health, for your gut health as well. is intermittent fasting. And so I tell you what, though, it's pretty easy to do. If you eat food like a dinner, if you eat at dinner 6 o'clock and then you go to bed around 11 o'clock, you're not going to be hungry. Then you sleep for 8 hours, and then all you got to do is fast for about 4 hours. And there you go. You got about 16, 18 hours of not eating and allowing your gut to heal. So there you go. God save the radio, flat earth. It's funny. I have another podcast I don't really talk about because I haven't really launched it yet. And we did a show about flat earth recently. It's funny. Type 1 diabetes. Jazzy B. Yeah. Type 1 diabetes. Has anyone ever been cured of it? The rumor is, yes. There's a book called There is a Cure for Diabetes by Gabriel Cousins. And that uses, but that's mostly type 2. But I believe type 1 could be reversed as well. I think everything can be reversed. You just got to ask God, ask the angels, ask them for guidance, and continue, put your head down and continue searching. I've run across some interesting ideas about type 1 that I wish I remembered right now, but I don't. But if I do, you can best bet we'll do a show on it. Lainey says, if you have time for a quick question, sure. Can you give me your opinion on nightshade vegetables bothering someone with leaky gut? Oh, God save the radio. What's the podcast? The podcast, my other podcast is not launched yet because, like I said before, I was going through the different areas of life where we're not being told the truth. And when you start doing some research, you start realizing that we haven't been told the truth about anything. But what I will do is every day I sit in the relaxed far infrared sauna, right? So Justin Stellman, you can search. I sit in the sauna and I watch documentaries. That's one of the things I do. Let me do this real quick. JustinStellman.com. That's my personal website. And I focus mostly there on personal development, spirituality, personal growth, looking into different ideas. And all of the documentaries that I watch are on there. So there's a page I have on there, and I'll just put it there. Flat Earth, all that kind of stuff, that's a whole separate thing that I've explored. Let's just say that. But I'm not convinced of anything yet, my friend. So I'm interested in learning and keeping an open mind. And I think the more mineralized you get, the more you are able to take in new information and create new neural pathways and synapses for your brain to fire and work correctly. So Lainey says, if you have a quick question, can you give your opinion on nightshade vegetables? Well, Lainey, you know what? I'm curious what your experience with nightshades are, because there's a lot of people that say things. Do you eat nightshades? And if you do, are you affected by them? Have you ever muscle tested for them? I suspect some nightshades are going to be good for some people at some times of the day and some times of their life. And then at other times of their day and other times of their life, nightshades are not going to be good. And not all nightshades are going to have the same effect on everybody. And so in our world, it's really easy for us to sort of demonize certain foods and demonize certain things and say all meat is bad, or the vegan diet is bad, or the eating animal food is bad. But in reality, there is no good or bad. There's only what is and what's optimal. And eating meat might be good for you for a little while. It may not be good for you after that. If you're going through a stressful time, you might need to increase your meat intake and then completely be vegan for the rest of your life. At this point, I was a 100% raw food vegan for 7 years. And you best believe I lived that lifestyle full on for 7 years. And for me right now, that's not the direction I want to go, but it's an amazing lifestyle. And I think that it could help a lot of people. In terms of nightshade vegetables, for me, here's what's interesting. Dr. Gundry says nightshades are bad, right? Because they contain a higher amount of these specific plant lectins that cause damage to the gut and decrease your body's ability to have your gut stay sealed. So it pokes holes in the gut, basically. So last night I had some tomatoes, and that's a nightshade vegetable. I felt great. So I don't know. My digestion's working perfectly, and I had tomatoes, and I've been eating tomatoes. So I don't know. Maybe is something happening? See, this is where we need to get, really. This is how in tune we need to get. We need to become so in tune with the food that we're putting in our mouth that we recognize damage when we don't feel it. So the problem is that, like, the average person is so gummed up on their inside that you probably have brothers and sisters and friends and family that can eat Oreo cookies and ice cream and cookie and pasta and cakes, and they feel great, right? That's because their body is so gummed up they can't feel anything anymore, right? What we want to get to the point is where we can feel something and we know something's not right, and I'm not there yet, even if you feel good eating it. That's not to say that you always need to look at something wrong, but for example, with the case of Dr. Gundry, he said that tomatoes have high amounts of plant lectins and they're damaging to your gut, right? So he's saying a statement that's sort of spoken of as gospel truth to all of humanity, and that can't be true because there's 7 billion people, right? So that can't be true for everybody at every time. So if, let's say for my example, if I'm eating the tomato and it's damaging me, would I feel it? Would you always feel it if something's damaging you? Well, no, because, you can eat pizza. I used to eat pizza with no regard, and I felt fine. So it's not always possible to feel, but if you can feel it, that's a good thing. That means your body's sensitive, and it's like when you get hit in the face. If you don't feel that, then something's wrong with you, right? So when you feel stuff, it's actually a good thing. Jess says it depends on if you're avoiding an anti-inflammatory diet. Well, yeah, it also depends on what time of night you eat nightshades as well, because according to Adam Bergstrom, who may or may not be accurate, the time that you actually eat the food matters. So those foods, nightshades, because they live underneath the ground typically, they're tuber root vegetables, and they don't get access to the sun, they're meant to be eaten later at night. So Adam would say that you won't have an issue with nightshades if you eat them at the right time. So who knows? I think what it ultimately comes down to is a lot of people out there with a lot of opinions. There's a lot of people out there that come on our show and they want to say this, that, or the other. Like we just had Stephanie Seneff on. Could she be totally wrong about glyphosate? Maybe. Or, so avoid dogma. And I know that's a dogmatic statement as well, right? But do your best to look into things and just be open-minded and pursue things and try things out for yourself. Because that's one of the things, Lainey, you probably know if you're a part of the academy, is that we're trying to teach everyone to be their own doctor and to not look to other people. And as human beings, unfortunately, it's really challenging to do this because we all want to look to other people as experts or people that we're going to learn from or motivated from. But, ultimately what it comes down to is us. Every person that's in our life is a secondary character in our story. They're just background characters. And we're the star. We're supposed to be the star of our own story. And that's really what it's all about. And understanding, reconnecting, and getting in tune with who you are and why you're here. And really do muscle testing. And really get involved in meditation. And that's something I need to get better at myself. I'm preaching to the choir here, but I need to get better at that myself. But there's other ways to get reconnected with yourself. And that's where it really comes down to, is not listening to what anyone else is saying. Even if you feel like you've got to take a job and your friends and family don't want you to take a job, that job, or but you really feel like it connects with your purpose, then it doesn't matter what anyone thinks. It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what Stephanie Seneff thinks. It doesn't matter what Dr. Bergman thinks. It doesn't matter what anybody on our show, Dr. Mercola, Dave Asprey, doesn't matter what any of these people think. If it violates your own code and your own sense of awareness of who you are and what makes you feel good, then it's meaningless. It's just data. And that's, I think, part of what our culture is about, is distracting us from ourselves, so that we need to have a an authority figure to come save us, and then in the form of a medical doctor, in the form of a priest, in the form of a police officer, in the form of a fireman, because all these people are there to save us. And that's why they call these people authorities, but they're not. They're not authorities. They're just people doing a different job than you. So whenever you see that word authority, I just run from it. Okay, my chiropractor did muscle testing and my body seemed to say no nightshades. Okay, but I wondered about your opinion. That's cool. Yeah, if your body said that, then go for it. And one of the things that Truth Calkins said years ago, that he's going to be on our show soon, but I really took from him, was when you make your first mushroom tea, like your first reishi tea, reishi is known for being like a spiritual tonic. It activates apparently the chakras in the body and allows you to become more spiritual and deep and, more intuitive that way. And so he said, like, when you make your first reishi tea, very strong dose, very strong cup, just sit with it and drink it slowly and see how it affects your biology and see how it affects your physiology and see how it affects you. Just sit in silence with something like that. And that's what we need to do with our food, with nightshades, with muscle testing. Just be calm and see what it does to us instead of, sitting around a dinner table full of people not recognizing what's going on. Check out SV3 Ringe on YouTube. He talks a lot about raw meat. Okay. And flat earth. Okay, cool. Can you put a link, God Save the Radio? Because I'm not sure. Maybe if you can put a link, that'd be great. Again, you may be disappointed. I like talking about, the planet we live on, but I'm not convinced of any one thing yet. I'm really interested in all of it. Jojo Bach says, to God Save the Radio, how can the earth be flat when all the planets are round and the sun supposedly goes around the earth? Sorry, not to change the subject. Okay, Jojo. Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of people ask that, but it goes really deep. So a lot of people that on the flat earth side, I don't want to get into flat earth, but on the flat earth side, it goes very deep. So all the planets are round, but they're not spherical in the flat earth model. So not to say I believe that, but it's interesting. Because who knows it wouldn't surprise, if someone told me, if God came out of the sky and told me, yeah, NASA's been lying to you your whole life, why would I think that like the education system's going to tell me the truth, or the pharmaceutical industry is going to tell me the truth, but the one, or they're all going to lie to me, but the only institution that's not going to lie to me is NASA? I mean, so I don't know. It doesn't really matter to me what shape the earth is, really, to be honest, because what matters is the kind of life we're living. And I've watched more flat earth videos than you can ever imagine. But it doesn't really matter to me anymore. I've sort of been there, done that. It's interesting. And if it is a conspiracy theory, it is the biggest one for sure, but it doesn't impact my life. Because if someone said, oh yeah, if someone came out of the sky and said, yeah, the earth is flat, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm still going to keep doing the work I'm doing. I'm still going to help educate and inspire people to change their health and their life. So, it doesn't really matter to me. What do you think about Rife machines? Do they work or not? I think you did a show with Nina Silver once. I did. And we have a Rife machine that we've been using like I told you before, we like to vet our products, right? So I've been using this Rife machine for a little over a year and really, really like it. We did a show years ago with not Stephen Connors, what is his name? Kevin Connors. Let me share a link in the chat room to a cool video, Truth Stream Media on YouTube, Rife. They did a cool video about Royal Raymond Rife, and it was really interesting. And the more I do research into biophysics, the more I'm starting to believe from an intellectual perspective, not from a practical perspective, because I already do, because I've been using it, the Rife machine, but from an actual mental perspective, that Rife machines are good. And the reason why is because when you start looking into the two genomes of the body, that's the genetic genome, the DNA, which is what all of natural health and natural healing and the medical model is focused on, is the biology. And then the other genome is it's biophysics. It's the physics side. It's the electrons, the protons, and all of that. It's the light frequencies. So when you start realizing what Einstein said, that if you really want to know and understand, or this was Tesla, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, look into sound, frequency, and vibration. And so that's what Rife Machine was on. He was really into the sound, frequency, and vibration. So when you start looking at the work of Dr. Jack Kruse, the work of Dr. Doug Wallace, the work of a lot of these other people that are talking about light, water, magnetism, you start realizing really quickly that our health is determined by photons and electrons, really, because that is what controls the mitochondria, is photons and electrons. And so, and the mitochondria is controlled by light, and light basically is frequency. And so when you start understanding all of that, then you start realizing, whoa, maybe there's something more to this, Rife Machine than we've been told. And so obviously if it works, then they're going to demonize it, which is exactly what they did to Royal Rife before. So I'm a big fan of Rife Machines. We're actually going to be putting one on our store here pretty soon. They're very expensive though. That's the one downfall to them. But if you're fortunate enough to ever get one, I think they're good. I really like them. What do I think about eggs? The egg yolk has been called the world's most perfect food. But always ask yourself, those eggs are probably coming from chickens, right? And chickens are a hybridized animal. So chickens aren't normal, like cows. Cows comes from the aurochs. They're extinct now. Cows weren't native to the earth, hundreds of thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, whatever your belief about how old the earth is. Cows weren't part of that. Cows were created. Same with chickens. So that's why you got to look at wild animals and wild food. But I, from time to time, eat raw egg yolks for sure, and I like them a lot. I think they contain astaxanthin. They contain all of the healthy fats for you. The raw egg yolks are just incredible. I've got 2 Rife Machines, but there are so many frequencies, it's hard to find the correct one for you. The principle seems sound, though. I also think Lavorsky was onto this with his machines. Yeah, interesting. I agree. Because, think about it. Like, what we're trying to do on the show is we're trying to empower all of you guys and all of us to take control of our own biology, right? So that means whatever level of health we have right now is a result of how we're living and the environment we're living in and the decisions we make, right? So I don't like to, if you go to our store, there's a lot of great products in our store. We're going to be putting a Rife Machine in our store soon. But the Rife Machine doesn't cure you. And the red light therapy that I use doesn't cure me of anything. It just sets up a foundational environment for my biology and my cells to be activated and to work properly. So all of these things, the blender doesn't do anything. Making a green juice doesn't do anything. What does things is living the way we're supposed to be living. These things just sort of help the process along. And so that's kind of, I really want to say that because I don't want people to think that unless they have a Rife Machine, they're not going to be healthy, or unless they have a far infrared sauna that we sell in our store, they're not going to be healthy, or unless they have a rebounder, they're not going to be healthy. This is bad sort of business because I should be telling people to go buy all of our stuff and all of that, but that doesn't resonate with me. That's not how I do things. If people don't support us in our store, then that's okay. But I have to be and tell you the truth is that none of these things, they just help you. They help speed the process of healing and getting optimal health along a little bit, but they don't cure you of any disease or anything like that. They can't. And I'm not just saying that because we can't make claims. I'm saying that because it disempowers you. Because if you think that I'm not going to be healthy unless I have a Vitamix blender, or I'm not going to be healthy unless I have a rebounder or anything like that, then you're sitting in that victim seat and that victim chair that they talk about on Cartman's triangle. So you don't want to be the victim. All of us are getting healthier every single day, regardless of whether or not we have a Rife Machine or a far infrared sauna or anything like that. We're all getting healthier. So that's what I want to impart to you, is that we're getting healthier every single day, and our body's always looking to get into homeostasis. We're looking to become healthy. We're looking to create a new foundational normal that supports us in what we're trying to do. And so the machines and the different things we have in our store, yes, they're great, and I love them and I use them, and I think they'd be great for you too. But that said, you don't need any of those. And so I just want to be like clear about that, because there's a lot of people that want to make you think that unless you have these things, you're not enough, and you are enough, and you don't need any of that. You know, it's like probably better than any rice machine or any Bellicon rebounder or any Juve red light therapy device. I love all those things, but probably better than all of that is to sit in a field under the sun in nature and meditate with a glass of water. You know, that's probably better than all of those things combined, in my opinion. And retraining your brain, this is where health comes from, is changing our subconscious mind and retraining our brain and to think correctly, and not to outsource our health to other people or think that we're not enough. This is where true disease starts. You know, it's not physical. You know, it's spiritual first, and then before it moves into physical, it's the physics of it, the photons and electrons and the mitochondria, and then you can get down into like the foods and all that kind of stuff. But all right, guys, I think I'm going to take off because I haven't eaten yet today, and I'm hungry. But let me just read a couple more things. I got 2 rife machines. Okay. Lakovsky, I should say, machine basically blasted the whole body with electricity frequencies and cured almost anything. There's someone who builds them in Croatia, but they're about 13 grand. Yeah, these things are really, really expensive. Jesse, if you can send me a link, I'd love to just look and see what that guy's doing. Here's the problem with these people, though, is that we can't say anything. You know, we can't make any claims, or we can't say anything. If we were to have that guy on our show, he can't say a word about what his machines do. I was talking to the good folks over at Sota Instruments, and this was a private phone call I had with them, 6 months ago. And check this out. This is the state of the government trying to silence people. This is where we're at. So I'm talking to a lady who does consulting work for Sota Instruments. So she's very in tune with them, right? So I'm talking with her on the phone, and we're talking about the work of Dr. Bob Beck and his work in frequency and vibration. And she said that the folks at Sota Instruments can't even say what their products do. And we're going to get them or some of those products on our store, because I use a couple of those products and I love them. But I won't be able to say anything about them. But this is what she was telling me. She was saying to me that she was talking to the owner of that company, and they said to her that some fan of theirs on Facebook said, I used one of your machines to cure this, that, or the other, right? And this was a customer of one of their products, and they clicked like on that. And it wasn't too long until they got some calls from men in black suits telling them that if they continue to do that, they're making public claims and could be subject to arrest for simply clicking like on a comment they didn't even make. So this is where we're at, guys. This is where we're at. So if we had this guy from Croatia on, we couldn't even talk about anything, because we can't say anything, because it would be making a medical claim about a product that could help people. And so that's why it's really important, I think, for people that aren't in this industry, like you guys, if you guys are not in this industry, to make YouTube videos about it and not sell it. And you can talk about it all you want as long as you're not selling it. And so that's how the word gets spread, and I think that's where it's at. You're right about good organic food and exercise. They do empower you. It's so easy, really, but it's so hard to get into that mindset. That's true. You have to have enough self-love for yourself, I think, to invest in self-care and soul care. And that's really what it is. It's being worthy enough and feeling like you deserve it, and it's okay to take care of yourself and spend time at the expense of other people. The Sota brain, no, I don't have the Sota brain tumor or brain tuner, but I've used it and I like it. And I have the what do I have of theirs? The magnetic pulsar and something else as well. Yeah, the brain tuner is good. I like all their products, man. Sota's really doing good stuff. And I'm not just saying that. They are really, really doing good stuff. Their water ozonator is cool too. You can ozonate and drink ozonated water, and then you can wash all your produce. Because, like it or not, if you're growing organic food in your own backyard, you're being exposed to tire dust, chemicals in the air, chemtrails, acid rain. You want to protect that stuff. And you want to wash that stuff even if you grow it yourself. And the best way to wash it is through their little mini ozone generator. You can, Sota Instruments, go to their website and you can grab it. Drink ozonated water and clean all your organic produce that way. Yeah, let's see. Okay, I think I got to go. I should clarify about nightshades. I meant if you are on an anti-inflammatory diet, I was told to avoid them at first and gradually reintroduce depending on how you feel. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, like that's the classical kind of thing, right? Is you're on an anti-inflammatory diet, you want to avoid nightshades. That makes sense. But gradually add them in, and as your body becomes more accustomed to them, perhaps it's, your body has a lot of glyphosate in it, and that's why you can't handle nightshades. And so maybe you fix that problem through the gut healing protocol, then you can start dealing with and accepting nightshades. So Jesse, yeah, thanks for that question. All right, guys, we love you guys so much. We're going to be back. I don't know if we're going to be back tomorrow because we did 2 shows today. So I don't know if we're going to be back, on Wednesday. But I think on Friday, if we don't have a show schedule, we're booking people all the time. So I'm going to do my best to do a free-for-all Friday show if we have no guests on Friday. If you want us to be back on Wednesday, I can come back and do a show on Wednesday as well. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. All right, guys, we love you. Let me pull up one more thing here. Make sure we can close out the show correctly. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel on YouTube if you're watching. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes if you're on there, or Stitcher. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review. And those of you also that are want to support us on Patreon, let me put a link here just in case you guys want to do that, because our shows are all free, and this is how we support ourselves. And picking really, really good products that we vet out, and also have a ability for you guys to support us on a per show basis. So if you go to extremehealthradio.com/support, I would appreciate that. You don't have to at all. But you can give $1 a month, $2 a month, $5 a month, whatever you think is good. If you like our shows, if not, and you can cancel anytime. You don't have to do it, but I would be greatly appreciative of that. We're looking to continually do more shows and to do videos, and all that stuff kind of costs money. So we have to invest in people producing the shows. We're going to start doing that, and so it all kind of adds up. So if you want to support the shows and the work that we do, you can do that on Patreon. So we appreciate that. There's links to that on the homepage of extremehealthradio.com. You can also go through our Amazon link as well. But don't forget to go to our store if you guys want any products like that. You're in the market for something like, Sauna, Bellicon, Rebounder, stuff like that. They're available in our store. So we're adding new products to our store all the time. So we love you very, very much. And maybe we'll be back Wednesday, but for sure on Friday. And I'll see you guys in a few days, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering readers medical advice of any kind. None of the information offered here should be interpreted as a diagnosis of any disease, nor an attempt to treat or prevent any disease or condition. While information in this blog is discussed in the context of numerous conditions, it can be dangerous to take action based on any information in this blog or to start any health program without first consulting a health professional. The content found here is for informational purposes only and is in no way intended as medical advice, as a substitute for medical counseling, or as a treatment/cure for any disease or health condition, and nor should it be continued as such. Always work with a qualified healthcare professional before making any changes to your diet, prescription drug use, lifestyle, or exercise activities. This information is provided as is, and the reader/viewer assumes all risks from the use, non-use, or misuse